Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another scary story. Your place where we uncover the darkest mysteries in a calming and reflective way. For the next hour, I want you to put on your earphones, put your phone face down, and close your eyes. Relax, and let this story take you to a world full of chills and mystery. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment sharing where in the world you're listening from. Now get comfortable and relax. I was 8 the summer we moved into the house at the edge of Briar Hollow, and even now, 30 years later, I can still feel that sick, heavy hush the woods carried, like the trees were holding their breath. The house was this rotting 2-story farmhouse, yellow paint peeling like sunburned skin, windows cloudy with dust. The porch sagged in the middle like a tired sigh. Mom called it quaint. I called it creepy. We'd left the city fast. No goodbye party, no warning. Just one day I came home from school and she told me to pack a bag. "It's a fresh start," she said. But I could see the panic in her eyes. That kind of panic doesn't come from a lease ending or a lost job. That kind of panic runs deeper, like something was chasing us, even if I didn't know what. The drive took hours. I remember the road narrowing the farther we got from town, the pavement giving way to gravel, then dirt. By the time we reached the property, it was nearly dark, and I could barely see the outline of the house through the thick curtain of pine trees. No neighbors, no streetlights, just the woods pressing in close like they wanted to swallow the place whole. The inside wasn't much better. Musty carpets, wallpaper peeling like old scabs, and a kitchen that smelled faintly of wet dog. The electricity worked, though the lights flickered, and the water ran if you jiggled the faucet just right. Mom tried to make it feel like home. She hung curtains, bought secondhand furniture from a thrift store an hour away, put up this calendar of wildflowers in the hallway like something bright could fix everything, but she was different out there. It started almost immediately, her staring out the windows for long stretches, jumping at the creak of a floorboard. Sometimes I'd find her just standing in the kitchen in the dark, one hand on the counter listening. "They're watching," she whispered once, her eyes never leaving the tree line. "Who?" I asked. She didn't answer. At first I thought she was just lonely, maybe even broken. My dad had never been around. I barely remembered his face. And Mom had this way of closing herself off from the world like a book snapped shut. But this was different. Like the house, the land, the woods, they were doing something to her. She made me sleep with the bedroom door locked, kept a bat by her bed. She nailed the cellar shut one night without explaining why. And every time I asked if we were safe out here, she just said, "It's better than before," whatever that meant. I tried to be brave. I played in the tall grass behind the barn, chased frogs near the creek. But even during the day, I'd catch glimpses, shapes at the edge of the woods that didn't move like animals, noises that didn't belong to birds or wind. Once I saw a figure between the trees, tall, thin, standing too still. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't tell Mom. I didn't want to make it real. But something was wrong out there. It wasn't just the way the shadows moved or how the house groaned like it was breathing. It was a feeling, a low, thrumming dread that never went away. Like we were being watched every second by eyes just out of sight, and somehow I think Mom had always known. The first few weeks passed in a haze of heat and strange silence. Out in Briar Hollow, the air hung thick and still, too still. You didn't hear crickets or birds the way you were supposed to. Just whined in the trees, and sometimes these low, hollow creaks from deep in the woods, like the trunks were groaning. It started with little things, easily dismissed at first. One morning I found muddy boot prints on the front porch, big ones. Too big to be Mom's, and definitely not mine. She tried to write it off. "Probably the mailman," she said, even though we both knew we hadn't seen a single delivery truck since we moved in. Then there was the cellar door. It was out back, sunk into the ground like something buried. Mom had bolted it tight the day we moved in. I remember watching her hammer the latch shut, muttering under her breath. But a week later, I found it swinging open. Just a crack. enough for the stale, cold air to spill out and raise goosebumps. On my arms, I told her. She didn't say a word, just grabbed the hammer, marched out back, and nailed it shut this time. When I asked why we didn't just check inside, she said, "Nothing good comes out of places that dark." Then came the scratches. I noticed them early one morning, just after the sun came up. They were around the back door, deep and jagged, like someone had jammed a knife into the frame and tried to pry it open. Not animal scratches. These were too intentional, too desperate. Mom stared at them a long time. Then she took out a hammer and nailed the window next to the door shut too. She was unraveling. She stopped cooking. We ate canned food straight from the tin. Beef stew, SpaghettiOs, green beans. I started leaving the dishes in the sink because she wouldn't let me open the dishwasher. "They can hear noise through the pipes," she said. "Water moves." I didn't know what that meant, but I nodded. You learn quickly not to argue with someone who's already afraid of the dark. At night, I'd hear her walking through the house barefoot, creaking over the floorboards. Sometimes I'd catch her staring out the front window, not blinking, like she was waiting for something. And then came the knocking. It was faint at first, barely there, like someone tapping from inside the walls. I thought I imagined it. But one night around 3 a.m. I heard it loud and clear. 3 knocks, slow and spaced out. I froze in bed, my covers pulled up to my chin, eyes wide. It came again, right behind the wall near my closet. I screamed. Mom came running in, knife in hand, eyes wild. She searched the room, checked the closet, the attic door, but nothing was there. She didn't scold me. She just pulled me into her lap and rocked me like I was 3 years old again. "They've found us," she whispered into my hair. The next day, she pulled the mattress away from the wall and set my bed in the center of the room. "They like corners," she muttered. "Corners are where things hide." That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. The tapping didn't come again, but I could feel something, just outside the house, waiting. I remember thinking, I wish we'd stayed in the city. I wish we'd never come to this place. And for the first time, I started to believe Mom wasn't crazy. Not completely. I stopped sleeping not long after the knocking started. It wasn't even the sounds that kept me up. It was the way the house felt at night, like it wasn't empty when it should have been. Like something else moved through it when the lights went out. I'd lie in bed, covers up to my chin, listening for the smallest sound, holding my breath when the floorboards creaked or the wind rattled the loose pane in the hallway window. Mom stopped using the lights at night. She said it made us too easy to see. So we lit candles, or sometimes just sat in the dark, whispering. I'd ask her questions I didn't really want the answers to. Why did we move here? Because it was cheap. Why don't we leave? And then she'd get quiet. That deep, hollow kind of quiet that told me the answer wasn't something I'd want to know. It was a couple weeks after the cellar door incident when the hand showed up. It had been a normal day. Normal for us anyway. We didn't go outside anymore. Not after Mom found the dead rabbit on the porch, its eyes missing. I spent most of the day drawing on the floor with broken crayons while she scrubbed the walls with vinegar. Said it helped with the smell, though I wasn't sure what smell she meant. I didn't smell anything. That night she made me sleep with my closet door open. Said it was better if we could see what was inside rather than wonder. It was the first time I ever hoped something would be there just so I could stop guessing. Must have dozed off at some point. It was cold, I remember that. Cold enough to see my breath even though it was still early fall. I woke up suddenly, like my body knew something before my brain did. And that's when I saw it. A hand. Pressed flat against my window. Not banging, not tapping. Just resting there. Pale as candle wax. Fingers long and thin. Spread wide like it was trying to feel through the glass. I couldn't see a face, just the hand. And the shape of a shoulder, like someone crouching just out of view. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just lay there staring, heart hammering so hard I thought it might shake the bed. After a few seconds, or minutes, I don't even know, it slipped away like it melted back into the dark. I stayed frozen until sunrise. In the morning, I tried to convince myself it was a dream. I even laughed a little, the way kids do when they don't want to admit they're still scared. But then Mom came into my room, tray in hand with 2 slices of toast, and she stopped mid-step. "What's that?" she asked, her voice barely above, a whisper. I followed her gaze to the window. 5 smudges, pale gray prints splayed across the glass. Like oil from someone's hand. You could even see the faint outlines of fingerprints. She dropped the tray, didn't say a word. Just walked out, came back with a screwdriver, and boarded the window shut. She spent the rest of the day pacing the hallway, chewing her thumbnail, staring out through the peephole in the front door like she was waiting for a war to start. That night I slept in her bed. She kept the knife on the nightstand, and a flashlight under the pillow. Neither of us closed our eyes, and from somewhere in the woods I swear I heard it. The same knocking. But this time, it was closer. I don't think I realized how bad things were getting until the puppies died. We'd only had them a couple of months. Mom said she got them for protection, but I think she really got them for me. Something to help me feel less alone in that big, creaky house. There were 3 of them. Bandit, Rosie, and Pickles. Bandit was the bossy one. Rosie liked to nap on my feet. Pickles barked at shadows, which Mom said meant he had good instincts. They all stayed out in the barn. It was a leaning, gray old thing with a sagging roof and rusted tools hanging like bones on the walls. Still, the puppies seemed happy there, and I liked going out in the morning to feed them. It gave me something to look forward to, something normal. Until the morning it wasn't. It was cold again that day, colder than it should have been. The grass was wet with dew, and the woods behind the barn were still covered in that early morning mist that never seemed to burn off. I carried their breakfast in a chipped mixing bowl and whistled like I always did. No barking, no scampering paws, just silence. When I slid the barn door open, the smell hit me first. Something sharp and wrong. My brain didn't connect the pieces until I saw them. All 3, lying in a circle of flattened hay. Perfectly spaced, their heads turned just slightly toward each other. Their little necks bent in unnatural angles, tongues lolling. No blood, no scratches. No signs of a fight. Just broken, arranged, like someone had placed them there. I dropped the bowl. The clang of metal hitting wood echoed loud through the barn, and for a second, I thought I heard something shuffle in the loft above me. I didn't. Look, I couldn't. I ran so fast I scraped my shin on the barn door going out. Mom was already on the porch. She saw me and started yelling before I could even speak. "What happened?" she snapped, grabbing my shoulders, eyes wild. "They're dead," I cried, the words clumsy and thick. "The puppies. Someone did something." Her face didn't change, not really. She didn't gasp or run to the barn. She just blinked like she'd been expecting it. Then she pulled me into the house and slammed the door behind us. That night, she nailed the barn shut, didn't bury them, didn't say a word about them again. She started keeping all our food inside the house, canned stuff mostly, and piled boxes up in front of the back door like barricades. I remember her watching. The fire in the fireplace like it was her last friend. I asked her if we could go stay in a motel. I asked her if we could call someone. The police, a friend, anyone. But she just looked at me and said, "No one comes to Briar Hollow, and no one leaves either. Not unless they want to bring it with them." I didn't know what it meant. I didn't ask. Because later that night I saw something move outside. It was standing in the clearing near the barn just beyond the reach of the porch light. A man-shaped shadow, but stretched. Wrong. He didn't move like people do. He just stood there like he was waiting for something, watching, and I knew somehow, deep in my bones, he'd been the one in my window. I crawled into bed with Mom. I didn't say a word, but I left the closet door open, just in case. After the barn, everything turned meaner. The air, the sounds, the way the house felt at night. There was no more pretending. Not even Mom tried to hide the panic anymore. She barely slept. She barely ate. She started locking every door and window, not just at night, but all day too. Even the bathroom, even the attic. I didn't ask questions, I didn't want the answers. One night, mid-October I think, something changed. The air was thick. It didn't feel like fall anymore, just heavy, like the sky was pressing down. I remember waking up because my throat was dry and everything was too quiet. No wind, no crickets, just silence so deep it made my ears ring. Then, the thump, like a sack of wet laundry hitting the porch. I froze. Another thump. I crept to my window, careful not to let my feet creak the floorboards. From behind the curtain, I peeked. Something was on the roof. Not walking, crawling. Slow, awkward. Too big to be a raccoon. Too heavy. I could hear it dragging, the claws scratching shingles like it was trying to get a grip. Then I heard Mom's voice sharp in the hallway. Lacey. She opened my door without knocking, grabbed my wrist, and yanked me out of bed. Her hand was shaking. I wanted to ask what was happening, but she just pressed her finger to her lips and mouthed one word. Fire. Outside, through the hallway window, I saw the flames before I smelled the smoke. The roof was glowing orange. Something had tossed a burning branch onto it. Not a little one either. This looked like someone had uprooted part of a tree and lit it like a torch. Mom dragged me into the kitchen and out the back door. We didn't stop to grab coats, not even shoes, just bolted into the yard and didn't look back. That's when I saw them, standing at the tree line. 6, maybe 7 figures, still as statues, tall and too thin. Their faces weren't faces, just pale shapes where eyes and mouths should be, like something had tried to copy a human from memory and gotten it all wrong. One of them took a step forward. That broke Mom. She screamed, this primal broken sound, and yanked me by the arm so hard I tripped and skinned my knees. We ran. Through the yard, through the field, into the woods. We didn't go back for clothes, or money, or photos. We didn't even lock the door. We just ran until our legs gave out and we slept in the dirt under a blanket of leaves. By morning, we found the road and flagged down a delivery truck. Mom told the driver she was escaping an abusive boyfriend. I didn't correct her. It was easier to believe. We never went back. She sold the house without stepping foot in it. Left. The furniture, the dishes, everything. I asked her once, years later, why she never called the police. She said, "Because what would I tell them, Lace? That shadows lit a fire and stood in the trees? That something knocked on the inside of the walls?" Then she looked away. That place doesn't play by the rules. People like us, we weren't supposed to be there. It's been over 30 years since Briar Hollow. I live in a city now. Apartment on the 4th floor, plenty of neighbors. Bright, streetlights. My therapist says I have residual trauma from childhood, that what I remember might not be real. But sometimes when the power goes out and the wind rattles the windows, I hear knocking inside the walls. Soft. Patient. And once, last winter, I smelled smoke, and the dragging started again. From the hallway. From the inside. They never left. I don't think they ever do. I should have said no. When Professor Hill asked me to house-sit his cabin in Blackwater Forest, I said yes without really thinking. I liked him. He wrote my recommendation letter for grad school, let me borrow books from his personal library, and once brought me soup when I got mono. He was one of the few professors who treated me like a human being, not just another student ID number. So when he mentioned he was heading out to France for a 6-week sabbatical and needed someone to look after his place, just make sure no pipes freeze, collect the mail, water the plants, I figured, why not? It was supposed to be quiet, peaceful, a chance to focus on my thesis without the noise of campus life, the drunk neighbors upstairs, or the temptation of endless late-night diner runs with friends. But the second I pulled up to the cabin, tucked away behind a wall of thick pine and cedar, I felt it. Off. Not bad exactly. Just unsettled. Like the trees were watching. The kind of silence that makes you instinctively lower your voice even when you're alone. Professor Hill's cabin was beautiful in that rugged, self-sufficient kind of way. Cedar-sided, 2 stories, with a stone chimney and a wraparound porch. It sat at the end of a long dirt road, the nearest neighbor a full 5 miles out. No Wi-Fi, spotty cell service, just a landline, a wood stove, and a shelf full of dusty National Geographics dating back to the 80s. I settled in fast enough. Stocked the fridge, picked a few cozy spots to read, explored the woods a little during the day. I kept the fire going at night and bundled up under layers of flannel blankets. The silence started to feel normal. Nice even, until the first knock. It was 2:17 a.m. I remember because I'd just read the same sentence in my book 3 times and glanced at the clock thinking, maybe I should give up and try to sleep. Then, bang. Not a tap. Not a polite knock. 3 heavy, deliberate bangs on the front door. I froze. It wasn't windy. No branches scraping, no sign of wildlife, just someone knocking. The motion sensor floodlight didn't flick on. I didn't hear an engine outside. No footsteps leading up to the porch. Just that knock, like someone had materialized out of thin air and decided now was the time for a visit. Heart pounding, I crept to the door and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the porch swing swaying, slightly in the stillness. Trees pressing close in the moonlight, and then a whisper. Right against the wood. So close I could feel it in my spine. Let me in. I backed away slowly. Like if I moved too fast, I'd draw its attention. I don't remember dialing 911. Only the icy panic in my hands as I tried to press the buttons right. The landline crackled like it was underwater, the dispatcher's voice warping in and out. Then, another bang. But not at the front door. The back. Then the windows. Like someone was circling the house, testing every way in. That's when I remembered. Something Professor Hill said weeks ago when I asked if it ever got lonely out there. He smiled and shrugged. "You'll be fine, Megan," he said. "Just don't open the door after dark." I thought he was joking. But now I wasn't so sure. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. After the knocks moved from the front door to the back and then to the windows, I grabbed the fireplace poker and locked myself in the upstairs bedroom. I wedged a chair under, the doorknob like they do in movies, though I had no clue if that would actually stop anyone. The landline kept cutting in and out, and I never got a full sentence from the 911 dispatcher. Just static and what might have been my own name crackling through once. "Megan?" before the line went dead completely. I kept the poker in my lap, sat in the farthest corner from the window, and waited for the sun to rise. At some point, in the early morning, maybe around 5, the noise stopped. No more knocking, no more scratching, just silence, and somehow that was worse. I stayed there until the sun pushed through the trees and turned the cabin from black to gray. Only then did I crack the bedroom door and slowly step out, half expecting someone to be standing in the hallway. But it was empty. Downstairs, everything looked normal. The front door was still bolted, the back door too. All the windows were intact. No shattered glass, no signs of forced entry, just an unsettling calm. And then I saw them. Boot prints, big ones. They circled the cabin. I spotted them from the living room window, tracks in the dirt that hadn't been there the day before. I stepped outside, my heart hammering, and followed them carefully around the perimeter. They stopped beneath every window, each one. But here's the thing. There hadn't been any rain for weeks. The ground was dry, dusty even. And yet these prints were muddy. Deep enough to leave a full tread behind as if someone had been standing there for hours. I called the sheriff's office again. The line still buzzed like it was on life support, but eventually I got through. 2 deputies came out an hour later, both older guys with that small-town weariness in their eyes, like they'd seen one too many drunk bar fights and not enough paychecks. They walked the property with me. One took pictures of the prints, the other jotted notes on a little yellow pad, more out of obligation than concern. "Probably some teenagers screwing around," the taller one said, chewing the end of a pen. Kids like to pull stunts out here. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But when his flashlight swept across the trees lining the property, it froze. Hey, we both saw it. A figure, way too tall, thin, still as stone, halfway between two trees. Could have been a person, could have been a trick of the light. But the flashlight stayed on it for a good 3 seconds before it moved, fast, back into the trees. The deputy ran toward it. I followed a few feet behind, but there was nothing. No body, no rustling. Just one single boot print in the pine needles. Deeper than the rest, like someone had stood there, watching. The other deputy radioed it in, though I'm not sure anyone really believed him. Before they left, they told me to keep the doors locked and call if anything else happens. Right. Like that would do anything. That night, I dragged a dresser in front of my bedroom door and slept with the poker, clutched in both hands. I kept the light on even though it barely helped, because no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling I wasn't alone. Not just in the cabin, but in my room. Like something was just outside the edge of my vision, waiting for me to blink. I woke up the next morning to an eerie quiet, but it didn't feel like the calm of relief. It felt like the quiet before a storm, the kind that gets too still and you know something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. The deputies didn't take me seriously, at least not as seriously as I wanted them to. They told me to lock up tight and go about my business, that they'd increase patrols in the area. Like that would make a difference. When I tried to call my boyfriend Drew, the phone lines were still spotty. I left a voicemail telling him I needed him to come over. But even then, I wasn't sure if he'd come. His idea of a fishing trip was usually a weekend of beers and cheap thrills at a bar, not some remote lake where he'd actually leave his phone off. I didn't know if he'd even get the message until much later or if I'd be on my own for the rest of this. Still, I wanted someone there. Anyone. Because I couldn't trust myself anymore. The rest of the day was a blur. I tried to keep myself busy, did a load of laundry, cooked some breakfast, though I barely ate, and kept an eye on the front door. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind made me jump. I was almost expecting to hear the knocks again. It's strange how fast paranoia can set in when you've been alone in a place that feels wrong. By late afternoon, I'd walked around the house again. The prints were still there. Fresh, like someone had made a loop around the house since the deputies had been here. I stared at them for what felt like hours, but my mind couldn't make sense of them. How could the tracks be fresh when it hadn't rained? Where were they coming from? And then I noticed something that made my stomach churn. The tracks weren't just under the windows. They were getting closer to the house. They wrapped around to the back door again as if they'd been pacing, watching. The prints were scattered like someone had been circling the cabin, and every step felt deliberate, measured, as though whoever it was waiting for something. I tried to ignore the rising panic in my chest and made another call, this time to Drew, who answered right away. "Meg, what's up, you okay?" His voice sounded odd, too calm for someone who should have been concerned. "Drew, you need to come here. Something's wrong. Someone's been on the property. I don't feel safe." There was a pause on the other end, a strange hesitation. "I'm coming, all right? I'll be there in a few hours. Just hang tight." I could hear the rustling of a car door, maybe him getting into his truck. But something about the way he said it so flatly unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't the normal Drew I knew, the guy who'd show up with some joke or a goofy comment to put me at ease. He was acting distant, almost too calm. I hung up and sat in the living room for what felt like forever. I kept the blinds half open, trying to catch any movement outside, my nerves fraying the longer I sat in silence. The light was fading, and the shadows grew long, across the yard. When Drew finally arrived around 7, he barely looked like he'd been out all day. His clothes were too clean. His boots didn't have a speck of dirt on them, though he'd supposedly been fishing all afternoon. "You didn't stop anywhere before coming here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "The lake's a bit of a drive, you know." He shot me a puzzled look, his smile tight and forced. "I just drove straight here, Meg. Wasn't in the mood to hang around. Why? You okay? I nodded, though the unease in my gut was starting to gnaw at me. I'm fine, just a little rattled. Can you check the windows? I think someone's been around here. And the ground's dry, but the boot prints are muddy. I don't get it. Drew's gaze flicked toward the window. You really think someone's out there? You've been getting spooked, huh? I didn't like the way he said that. It wasn't dismissive exactly, it was more like he was humoring me, like it wasn't a big deal. But then he slipped his jacket off, and I caught sight of his boots. They were covered in black mud, the same black mud I had seen under the window, the same mud that didn't belong out here in the dry, dusty soil. I froze. Drew noticed my stare and followed my gaze down to his boots, a slight tension building between us. A small, almost invisible smile tugged at the corner of his lips like he knew something I didn't. Drew, I said, trying to steady my voice, where'd you get that mud? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Meg, come on, it's fine. You're safe with me. Let's just forget all this, all right? You've been cooped up in here for too long. Let's just relax. But I wasn't ready to relax. Not with that. Look in his eyes, that's when I heard it. A light tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was just the wind. But the knocking didn't stop. It was coming from the closet. The knock at the closet door echoed through the cabin like a distant drumbeat. I froze, heart thundering in my chest. My gaze shot to Drew, who was standing just a few feet away, his expression unreadable. The tapping came again, more urgent this time. I could hear it through the thin wood, each knock like a warning. Drew's eyes flicked over to the closet, then back to me. Meg, stop. It's nothing. But his voice wasn't as convincing as it used to be. There was a tremor in it now, something I'd never noticed before. I stood up from the couch, every nerve in my body screaming at me to move. But I couldn't bring myself to take the first step. The air in the cabin felt thick, suffocating, and every shadow seemed to twist and stretch out of the corners of my vision. I forced myself to turn, my feet carrying me toward the closet, even though I didn't want to get any closer. Drew followed me, but slowly. Too slowly. The tension between us felt like a tightrope I was walking, one wrong move and we'd both fall. The knocking continued, each tap sending an icy chill down my spine. When I reached the closet, I didn't know what I expected to find. An intruder? A prank? My own fears playing tricks on me? But I opened the door slowly, my hand shaking so badly I almost couldn't get the knob to turn. There was nothing inside but the usual. Jackets, shoes, a few boxes. Nothing out of place. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. The closet felt colder than the rest of the cabin, the air heavy and thick with something I couldn't name. I slammed the door shut, the noise echoing in the room. What the hell's going on, Meg? Drew's voice broke through the silence, and I turned to face him, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. You didn't answer my question. I could barely get the words out. Where did you get that mud? He took a step toward me, but his eyes darted around the room, avoiding my gaze. The smile from earlier was gone now, replaced with something colder, more calculating. I told you, it's from the lake. I must have stepped in something near the shore. The lake, I repeated, my voice tight. The lake that's miles away, and you didn't stop anywhere before coming here? He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at the floor like he was thinking about something. When his eyes finally met mine again, they were darker, colder than they had ever been. I don't know what you're trying to do here, Meg, but this isn't helping anything. I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure it out. We'll just forget about all this. No. My voice broke and I took a step back, shaking my head. I can't forget. Something's wrong, Drew. Something's been wrong since last night. It's not just the knocking, it's you. You're not acting right. For the first time, I saw something shift in him, a flicker of doubt. His eyes narrowed, lips curling into a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. You're acting paranoid, he said slowly. You're overthinking everything. There's nothing out there. It's just in your head. I wasn't sure if I believed him anymore. I swallowed, my throat dry. What did you do last night, Drew? Really? He stared at me, and for a moment the air between us felt too still. His eyes flickered to the window, the door, anywhere but my face. "I told you," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I went fishing. I wasn't anywhere else. You're starting to sound crazy, Meg." Crazy. That word, right there, made my skin crawl. Drew had used it before when I'd asked too many questions, but this time, there was something more sinister in the way it rolled off his tongue. It felt like a dismissal, a way to make me doubt everything I was feeling, everything I was seeing. Before I could say anything else, there was a faint sound, another knock. This time it was coming from the kitchen. It was so faint I wasn't sure if I had heard it at all. I glanced at Drew. He wasn't looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the floor, his body tense. His hands were clenching and unclenching like he was trying to control something that was about to explode. "Drew, stop." My voice was quiet, but insistent. "What's going on? Where were you last night?" He didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the door and pulled on his jacket. "I'm going to step out for a bit," he said without looking back. "Get some air. You need to calm down." I wanted to stop him to demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat. He walked out of the cabin without another word, leaving me standing there, alone, trembling. And just like that, the door slammed shut behind him, leaving me in the thick silence. The knocking had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Drew hadn't just left to get some air. He was hiding something, and I didn't know if I wanted to know what it was. I spent the next few hours pacing around the cabin, the silence stretching so thick I could hardly breathe. Drew had left, and I hadn't seen him since. Every creak of the house felt amplified, each rustling of the trees outside like a whisper in my ear. I could still hear the faint knocking, though it had stopped for now. I was sure it wasn't over. It never was. I hadn't realized until now how much Drew had been a part of this, how much his presence had made me feel safe, even when things seemed off. But now, with him gone, I was just a girl alone in a cabin, deep in a forest, surrounded by shadows. The air in the room was thick, oppressive. Every sound, every shift in the house felt like it was coming from somewhere else, somewhere hidden, somewhere inside. I tried calling my professor, but the connection was spotty, cutting in and out. The same happened when I tried the sheriff's office. The line was too quiet, too empty, like there was no one on the other side. My heart sank, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I wasn't just alone physically. I was alone in every sense of the word. I turned back to the closet, feeling the same icy dread from earlier. The space seemed smaller now, its shadows deeper, as if it was pulling me in. I felt the weight of the night pressing against me, the night where Drew's lies had started to unravel, the night where every noise, every knock, every moment of fear felt real. Too real. I walked to the window, peering through the blinds. The trees outside were still bathed in the eerie, dim glow of the moonlight. There were no signs of Drew, no lights, no movement, nothing. But then, something caught my eye. It was a shadow, just on the edge of the forest, standing still like a monument. It wasn't the shape of a man, not quite. Too tall, too wide. The silhouette was wrong, even from this distance. A limb stretched unnaturally long, and the form swayed in the moonlight as if it had no intention of moving. A chill settled in my bones. It wasn't Drew out there. I knew that much. The door to the cabin creaked open. I didn't even hear Drew return. He stepped in without a word, his figure casting a long shadow across the room. He closed the door behind him, locking it with a quiet click. I didn't turn to face him. "You shouldn't be here, Drew." My voice was hoarse, and I fought to steady it. The air between us had shifted, something between anger and dread, too close to either of us to ignore. Drew didn't speak right away, but I heard him set something down on the table. The click of his boots echoed loudly in the silence. Then came the sound I dreaded, a slow, deliberate exhale. like he was steeling himself. "I didn't want to do this, Meg," he said, his voice cold and distant, but it had to happen sooner or later. I finally turned to look at him. His expression was unreadable, like a stranger wearing his face. He had always been calm, always so collected, but now there was something different in his eyes. Something darker. "I don't know what's going on, Drew," I said, my voice trembling, "but I'm not going to let you scare me anymore. Whatever you're hiding, you don't get it," Drew interrupted, his voice now sharp and cutting. "I never wanted you to be part of this. But you've made it too hard. You had to see it. Had to know." My breath caught in my throat as he took a step closer, his shadow swallowing mine in the low light. I backed up, bumping into the wall. What do you mean?" I barely managed to whisper, a knot forming in my stomach. He smiled then, but it wasn't the smile I knew. It wasn't a friendly grin or a comforting expression. It was a cold, empty stretch of lips that sent my blood running cold. "You're not the first person who's lived in this cabin," he murmured, his voice distant, almost nostalgic. "And you won't be the last." I shook my head, backing away, unable to comprehend the words. "Stop it, Drew. Please." He stepped forward, forcing me to look up at him. "This place, it's alive in a way you can't understand. It chooses its own." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And I was chosen a long time ago. So were you." I stumbled backward, my heart racing, the room spinning as I tried to understand what he meant. You're not making sense," I whispered. "What do you mean?" Drew didn't respond. Instead, he reached out, grabbing my wrist with a force that took me by surprise. His grip was tight, almost too tight. His hand was cold, and I could feel something sickeningly wrong crawling beneath his skin. Then, he opened his mouth, but it wasn't the Drew I knew. It wasn't even a human voice. It was the voice from the closet, the voice that had whispered, "Let me in." "Let me in, Meg," the voice said. Not from Drew's lips, but from somewhere deeper inside him. Something else that was wearing his skin. Something old. I screamed, my mind racing, and in a frenzy I wrenched myself free. I bolted for the door, but before I could make it, I heard a sound that froze my blood. The unmistakable creak of the closet door opening behind me. The shadow in the trees had moved. It wasn't Drew anymore. Not by a long shot. I ran. I don't know how far I made it, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The forest was closing in around me, the trees pressing too close, their branches reaching like fingers. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Eventually, I reached the road, panting, my vision swimming, my heart in my throat. The sound of the knocking. The voice still echoed in my ears, but the cabin, Drew, and whatever had taken him were far behind me now. For the first time, I could breathe. But even as I walked away from the cabin, I knew the truth. The thing in the woods, the thing that wore Drew's face, it was still out there, waiting for the next one to come along, and I would never be able to forget it. I had always preferred the midnight train, the one that left Harper's Junction at 11:15 p.m. and rattled its way down the tracks toward Blackwater Station. It was a ghost train for people who didn't want to be seen, the kind of train you take when you're in the middle of a long shift, working through the hours when everyone else is asleep. It was quiet, peaceful. Most people took the commuter train at 7 a.m., but that wasn't for me. I worked long hours at a low-paying office job, one where you were expected to put in more hours than you were paid for, and by the time I finished, the world was already shutting down. That's how I found myself on the midnight train every night. It was a different crowd at this hour. Graveyard shift workers, drunks trying to get home from late-night bars, and those like me who didn't want anyone asking too many questions. We all knew the rules of the train. You kept your head down, didn't make eye contact, and certainly didn't engage in small talk. The train was like a tiny, moving world where we could exist in quiet isolation, free from the demands of the day. I had made the trip countless times, always the same routine. I'd board at Harper's Junction, find my seat in the near-empty car, and settle in with my earbuds. the rhythmic clatter of the tracks providing a comforting soundtrack to my fatigue. Every night felt the same, until that night. It was Millfield, crossing when I first noticed him. I had been staring out the window, watching the darkened countryside blur past, when the bathroom door opened with a sharp metallic screech. A man stumbled out, clutching the doorframe to steady himself. He was gaunt, his skin ashen and stretched tight over his bones like he hadn't eaten a full meal in weeks. His trench coat was stained, the fabric frayed at the edges. But it wasn't the look of him that made me take notice. It was the way he moved. He wasn't walking so much as swaying, and his left eye, his left eye kept twitching. It was unsettling in the way it jerked, a quick, unnatural motion like something was crawling beneath his skin. I watched him out of the corner of my eye as he stumbled toward the seats, murmuring to himself, 2, 3, 5. 1. 1. He mumbled, the words jumbled together in a rhythm that didn't make sense. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to ignore him, hoping he would pass by without noticing me. But when he reached the aisle, his head snapped up, his twitching eye locking onto mine. "You look like her," he hissed, his voice low and raspy. I froze, my body stiffening. I didn't know what to say. His breath, it smelled like rotting meat mixed with gasoline, a combination so foul that it made me want to gag. Before I could react, he took a step closer. His face was inches from mine now, his skin pale and stretched too thin. "She told me what to do with Dad," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Told me to take the hammer to his..." I recoiled instinctively, my pulse spiking, my throat closed up. What was this guy talking about? Who was he talking about? I tried to edge away, but he blocked the aisle with his body, standing too still, for comfort. His fingers flexed, curling and uncurling like he was preparing to grab something or someone. I had no idea if he was actually dangerous or just another crazy person who couldn't keep their thoughts in check. But I wasn't willing to take the chance. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my mind was racing, but I couldn't think. I was trapped in that small space, unable to escape without confronting him. And then, it happened. I screamed. The sound ripped through my throat, raw and guttural, and for a brief second the entire train seemed to stop, the noise swallowing, up the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. His eyes widened for a split second like he hadn't expected me to fight back. And then, just as quickly, 2 men from the next car rushed in. They were construction workers, burly and rough-looking, and they shoved the man away from me. He spun, his coat flaring out like dark wings, and for a split second I saw something beneath the fabric, something too many-jointed to be an arm. My stomach lurched. He was gone before I could blink, disappearing through the emergency exit in a flash of movement, leaving only the scent of gasoline and rot lingering in the air. The train screeched as it pulled into Blackwater Station, the brakes whining in protest as we slowed down. The workers turned to me, their faces pale, their hands still shaking. One of them asked if I was okay, but all I could do was nod, my mind reeling. I didn't know what had just happened. I didn't know what kind of man I'd just encountered, but I would find out soon enough. The moment the train stopped at Blackwater Station, the doors slid open with a faint hiss, and the night air rushed in. It felt like a fresh breeze, but I didn't have the capacity to appreciate it. I was still sitting, in my seat, my hands clutching the armrest so tightly that my fingers were numb. The adrenaline was still pulsing through me, but my body had already begun to shut down, leaving me feeling hollow and dazed. The 2 construction workers were still standing in the aisle, looking at each other with confusion etched on their faces. One of them, a tall guy with a thick beard and a worn baseball cap, looked down at me and asked in a rough voice, "You all right, miss?" I blinked up at him, still too shaken to speak. I opened my mouth, but all that came out was a hoarse whisper. I don't know. I felt like I was still stuck in a bad dream. The words from that man, the one who had come out of the bathroom car, his voice still echoed in my head. The one who laughs when the wires snap. What did that even mean? What was he talking about? The second construction worker, a younger guy with a scruffy face, leaned forward, looking me over with a worried frown. "What did he say to you?" "You were screaming." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. He just He said things about someone named Dad and a hammer. I don't know. It didn't make sense. The older worker nodded, grimly, his eyes narrowing. That's Lucas Werner. I felt my stomach flip. I had no idea who Lucas Werner was, but the name sounded familiar, like something I had heard in passing conversations. Maybe he was someone from around here? A local? The way the man said it, though, it wasn't a name you'd say casually. There was weight behind it, a tone of recognition that made my skin crawl. The younger guy, still trying to process everything, muttered, "Yeah, man's crazy. Comes around here all the time, causing trouble. He's been in and out of the hospital, but I thought they had him locked up for good." He turned to the other worker. "I thought he was off his meds for sure. No surprise he's back out here." I wasn't sure what I was hearing. Meds? Hospital? Was this man some kind of schizophrenic or something? "Who is he?" I asked, my voice still shaky. "What's wrong with him?" The older guy glanced over his shoulder, checking to make sure no one else was listening. Then he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He's got a history around here. Something about a woman he keeps talking about. The woman in the wires. Hell if I know what that's about, but he's been fixated on her for years. Some people say she tells him things, makes him do things he doesn't want to. But whatever it is, it's not right." The words barely made sense, but the way he said them, with that unmistakable tone of dread, sent another wave of unease through me. The woman in the wires? Was this guy really dangerous? Or was it something worse? I could feel the weight of the silence settling between us as the two workers exchanged a glance. Neither of them seemed eager to stick around any longer. The younger guy muttered something under his breath and moved toward the exit. His footsteps hurried, like he couldn't get off the train fast enough. The older guy stayed a little longer, eyeing me with a sympathetic glance. "I'd get off. Here if I were you, miss. Blackwater's a good place to get off and get away. You don't need to be dealing with this kind of mess, especially with a guy like Werner. I don't know what's going on in that head of his, but trust me, it's not something you want to be a part of." With that, he turned and followed the younger guy, leaving me alone on the train. I wasn't sure what had just happened. One moment, I was alone on the train, minding my own business, and the next I was being told that some man had been stalking the station for days, muttering about a mysterious woman and a hammer. It was a lot to process, and the worst part? I was scared. I wasn't scared of him, at least not in the moment, but something about the way the older worker had said, "You don't need to be dealing with this," made me feel like I had just escaped something far worse than a crazy guy on a train. The station lights flickered as I stepped off the train. Blackwater Station was eerily quiet at this hour. There were no crowds, no busy workers rushing to get on or off. Just empty platforms and the quiet hum of a distant streetlight. I shivered, but I wasn't sure if it was the cold or the fear still crawling under my skin. I walked toward the ticket office, hoping that maybe I could get a cab home. My mind was spinning, and I needed to put some distance between myself and everything that had just happened. I didn't want to be here anymore. I wanted to forget about the man, his words, the look in his eyes. But something told me that wouldn't happen. The doors to the station slid open as I approached, and I heard the sound of feet scraping across the tiled floor inside. I was hoping it was someone to help me, but when I looked up, I saw the police. The older cop approached first, his cigarette already dangling from his lips, smoke curling up in the cold air. His partner, slightly younger, with a hard edge to his gaze, followed him. "You the one who screamed?" the older cop asked, his voice gruff. I nodded slowly, still feeling a bit numb. "Yes, that man, Lucas Werner. He was talking to me. He kept saying strange things about a woman, about a hammer." The younger cop sighed, flipping through a dog-eared folder. "Werner, yeah," he muttered. "Third time this month. Always talking about the woman in the wires. He's a real problem around here." The older cop glanced over at his partner before turning his attention back to me. He lit his cigarette with shaky hands, exhaling the smoke in a long stream. "Look, miss, you don't want to be involved with this guy. He's not someone you mess with." He handed me a small piece of paper. "Go home. Don't take the train for a while. And stay safe. You don't need to be caught up in whatever's going on with Werner." I couldn't help but feel the dismissive tone in his voice. They clearly weren't taking it seriously. They didn't understand the weight of the encounter. Maybe they thought I was overreacting. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was coming. Something that involved me. Something about the wires, about the woman, and about the hammer. The older cop lit another cigarette and turned away. "You'll be fine, just stay off the trains for a while." And with that, they left. I stood there alone in the station, the weight of their words sinking into my chest. I didn't feel fine, not by a long shot. It wasn't over yet. I took a cab home that night, the streets of Blackwater blending into the shadows as we drove away from the station. The driver didn't say much, just the occasional grunt of acknowledgement when I gave him the address. I couldn't blame him. The atmosphere in the city was too thick with tension. Something felt off, like there was something lurking just outside the edges of the world I knew. I didn't dare look at the rearview mirror too often, but when I did, the reflection of the dimly lit streets and the occasional pedestrian moving too quickly under the streetlights made my skin crawl. I could still feel the man's breath on my skin, that rancid mix of rotting meat and gasoline that lingered in my nose long after I had left the train. And those words, "the woman who laughs when the wires snap." What did that even mean? Who was the woman? Was she real? Or was this just the product of someone's broken mind? I didn't know, and every time I tried to piece it together, the jagged edges of my thoughts just scattered further apart. The cab pulled up to my building, and the driver didn't even bother to stop in front of the door. He just slowed down, threw the car into park, and muttered something about good luck before driving off into the night. I couldn't even bring myself to care. I wasn't interested in small talk. I just wanted to get upstairs, lock my door, and pretend nothing had happened. But the moment I stepped into my apartment, I knew something was wrong. My phone was buzzing on the kitchen counter, the harsh, shrill sound of it cutting through the quiet of my apartment. I didn't have any new texts or notifications, so the ringing was strange. Something about it felt wrong, like it had a purpose I couldn't quite understand. I wasn't expecting anyone to call me at this hour, especially not after everything that had just happened. I walked over to the counter, my pulse quickening as I reached for the phone. The screen lit up with an unknown number. I hesitated for a second, my fingers hovering over the screen before I slid my thumb across the unlock button. I expected a wrong number, or maybe a telemarketer. Anything to break the silence, really. What I didn't expect was the word that popped up on my screen. Tracks. I stared at the word, trying to make sense of it. My heart started racing again, the blood pounding in my ears. Tracks. It was all I could see. The letters seemed to blur together before my eyes, the word echoing in my head like a warning. But a warning of what? I fumbled to tap on the screen again, hoping to get some context, some explanation for the message, but there was nothing else. No number attached to it, no name, just that single word. A shiver ran down my spine as I stared at the screen, trying to breathe through the sudden spike of panic. Tracks. The word felt like it had weight, a command almost. I wasn't sure why, but it felt like something, or someone, was trying to tell me something. I tried to shake the feeling off, convinced I was just being paranoid. After all, it could just be some prank. But the memory of Lucas Werner's wild, bloodshot eyes and the way he had muttered about the woman in the wires flooded back into my mind. His words tangled with the word on my phone, weaving together in a way that made my chest tighten. There was a connection. I knew it. I tried to tell myself that it was nothing, just a random, strange message, but it didn't stop my mind from spiraling. I went to the living room, pacing back and forth, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. What was I supposed to do? What was happening to me? The sound of a train whistle suddenly broke through the silence. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was distant, far away, but I could still hear it. The low, mournful sound of a train horn echoing through the night. My eyes shot toward the window, my heartbeat speeding up. It was 3 a.m. at least. The last train from Blackwater had long since left. The whistle should have been silent by now. My apartment was too far from the tracks for me to hear anything unless it was incredibly loud. But this sound was unmistakable. It was like a memory that wouldn't let go, a ghost from the past that I couldn't shake. The train whistle was haunting, lonely, almost like it was calling out to me. I rushed to the window, pulling the blinds aside and staring out into the dark. Nothing. The street was empty. The usual quiet of the city wrapped around the buildings like a blanket. The wind rustled the trees down the block, but that was it. There was no sign of a train anywhere. No flashing lights, no passing cars, no rumble of wheels on the tracks. It was like the world had gone still, except for the whistle. That whistle. I stood there for a moment, my breath shallow as I tried to make sense of it. Then my phone buzzed again. It was a text, a photo. I opened it hesitantly, praying it wasn't just some cruel prank. But when the image loaded, I felt my stomach drop. It was a photo of the tracks. Black, desolate, empty, except for one thing. A figure, standing near the edge of the tracks. A silhouette that was too far away to make out, but somehow it felt like it was looking straight at me. My body went cold. The figure in the photo was standing at the station, Blackwater Station. And that whistle, it wasn't just a train. It was a warning. A signal that someone was waiting for me. I stumbled back from the window, the air thick with dread. My mind raced, but I couldn't form coherent thoughts anymore. Everything felt like it was closing in around me, like I was being pulled into something I couldn't escape. I grabbed my jacket, heart pounding in my chest. I had to get to Blackwater Station. I had to see it for myself. Maybe I was imagining things, maybe it was all just some twisted coincidence, but I couldn't sit here and pretend everything was fine. I wasn't going to wait for the next whistle. Was going to face whatever was on those tracks. I didn't have a plan, not really. My mind was running on pure panic, a frantic need to do something to stop whatever was coming or whatever had already started. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, my fingers shaking as I yanked it on. I didn't even know why I was going to Blackwater Station. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. But something in me screamed that I couldn't just sit here and wait. The whistle, the photo, the message on my phone. They were all connected somehow. The woman, the wires, the hammer, tracks. It all felt like a twisted puzzle, and I was just a small piece in a game I didn't understand. I left my apartment in a hurry, locking the door behind me and bolting down the stairs. My feet slapped against the pavement as I rushed to the corner, my breath already coming in ragged bursts. The city felt different at this hour. Quieter, the kind of quiet that presses in on you, making everything feel more dangerous. I looked up at the sky, dark, cloudy, as if it was about to rain. But it wasn't just the weather that made the air feel thick. It was everything that had happened, everything I still didn't understand. I hailed a cab, barely glancing at the driver as I jumped into the back seat. I could already feel my hands trembling again, my heart thumping against my ribcage like it was trying to escape. The driver didn't ask where I was headed, just turned the car in the direction of Blackwater Station as if he knew. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything right now except figuring out what the hell was going on. The streets were emptier now. Fewer cars, fewer people, as if everyone else had the good sense to stay inside. The darkened buildings passed by like ghostly figures, their windows dark and empty. I didn't know if it was the late hour or just my nerves, but the city felt like a ghost town. I could barely breathe, every minute in the cab feeling like an eternity. The closer we got to Blackwater, the more the anxiety coiled in my chest. Every streetlight seemed to flicker, casting long, eerie shadows on the pavement. The cab turned down an alleyway I hadn't noticed before, and I had a sudden, sharp realization that I didn't know this part of the city. I had never been here after hours. The train station was a bit off the beaten path, but this area was unfamiliar. My throat tightened as I looked out the window, seeing nothing but dark buildings and the occasional stray cat darting across the street. The streetlights were spaced far apart, leaving pockets of shadow. We turned another corner, and then in the distance I saw it. Blackwater Station. It loomed ahead, an old building, its structure worn down by years of weather and neglect. The station was barely lit, flickering lights above the doors and a few dim lamps hanging over the tracks. There was a sense of abandonment hanging in the air, a heavy silence that made my pulse spike. The station didn't look closed, but it didn't look open either. No commuters, no cars, no sign of activity. Just the eerie hum of the empty train platform. I paid the cab driver quickly, trying to ignore the unsettling knot in my stomach. My hands felt clammy as I fumbled for the door handle. When I stepped out onto the pavement, the cool night air hit me with a force that almost knocked the wind out of me. The streets here were even quieter than the ones I'd just passed. Not a single person in sight. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but this wasn't it. The station loomed in front of me, its windows dark like the empty eyes of a skull. My shoes echoed loudly against the pavement as I walked toward the platform, my heart racing with every step. The silence around me was suffocating. No hum of the train, no movement in the shadows, just the distant sound of wind rustling through the trees. As I approached the platform, I noticed the air had a strange quality to it. It felt too still, like everything was holding its breath. The tracks stretched out ahead of me, rusted in places, cracked where they met the platform. I walked closer, trying to make sense of the unease gnawing at me. There was no sign of life, no other passengers, no train. But then, a flash of movement caught my eye. A figure standing just beyond the tracks near the overgrown bushes that lined the far side of the station. I froze. For a second, I thought it was my imagination. Maybe it was the stress, the panic, the exhaustion. But no, it was real. The figure was tall, thin, dressed in a long coat. I couldn't make out the details from this distance, but something about the way they stood, still, unmoving, felt wrong. The figure's head turned slightly as if it had heard me. I couldn't breathe. That's when I realized. It wasn't just a person standing there. It was waiting for something, or someone, and my gut told me it was waiting for me. I stepped back instinctively, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. I couldn't move. My thoughts scrambled together, each one louder than the last. This was it. The figure, the woman in the wires, the whistle. Everything I had been trying to ignore was right in front of me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and tried to dial, but the screen was blank. The phone was dead. My stomach twisted and my mind screamed for me to run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure standing near the tracks. I wasn't alone. The figure slowly moved, stepping toward the edge of the platform with an unnatural slowness. My body refused to react. Fear had rooted me to the spot. The figure was getting closer, and with every inch it moved, the air seemed to grow heavier, thicker. And then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the figure stopped. Felt the ground beneath my feet tremble. A train was coming. I didn't hear it at first, but as the seconds passed, the unmistakable sound of clanking metal grew louder. The low rumble of the train, the tracks creaked. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the whistle again. The unmistakable mournful call of a train, and then it hit me. This train wasn't just on its way. It was already here. I turned on my heel and ran toward the station's entrance, my footsteps echoing louder now as the train grew nearer. The platform was dark, but the train's headlights began to glow on the horizon, cutting through the night like a blade. But as I reached the entrance, the door slammed shut. I pounded on it hard, my breath coming in panicked gasps. I was trapped. A figure appeared in the window, thin, gaunt. His face wasn't visible, but I knew who it was. Lucas Werner, the man from the train. And behind him, the flickering light of something or someone was closing in. I was running out of time. The train whistle howled again, and I knew deep down that there was no escaping it. The tracks were calling, and I had just walked into their trap. The train's headlights grew brighter, the sound of it rattling against the tracks vibrating through my bones. I slammed my fists against the glass doors of the station, but there was no answer, no movement inside. The platform was still empty, No one to help, no one to stop what was happening. I turned to look at the tracks again, heart racing. The train was closer, now its rumbling filling the air. It was coming faster than it should have been, too fast, and I could see it in the distance. An old, dilapidated train that looked like it hadn't been used in years. The kind of train that shouldn't be running. The kind of train that shouldn't even exist anymore. I could barely catch my breath, my mind spinning with all the things that didn't make sense. How had I gotten here? How had I found myself caught in the middle of this madness? The figure, the woman in the wires, Lucas Werner's words, the hammer, the warnings. It was all coming together now, in a way I wasn't prepared for. I stumbled, back from the door, my pulse thudding in my ears. My legs were shaky, weak from fear. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't get away from this place. There was no escape. It was as if the train had a pull of its own, a gravitational force that kept me rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the realization that I had walked into something far darker than I could understand. The wind picked up again, howling as it swept across the platform. I thought I saw something shift at the edge of the tracks. At first, it was just a flicker, something in the shadows, just out of sight. But then I saw it more clearly. A figure, tall, thin, the same silhouette that had been standing there when I arrived. It was standing at the far end of the platform now, closer to the train, its face obscured by the darkness, but its outline unmistakable. I gasped, my throat closing up with the terror that was creeping over me. I couldn't breathe. The figure took a step forward, and with it, the sound of the train grew louder, more insistent. There was no escape now. No way out. I turned back to the locked door, trying once again to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. My hands were slick with sweat, trembling as I pressed my palm to the cold glass. There had to be another way. There had to be a way to stop this. But then the figure stepped into the light. It was him, Lucas Werner. I knew it in my gut. I could feel it in my bones. It was the same man from the train, the one who had whispered about the hammer, the one who had scared me into silence. But now, as he stepped forward, his face illuminated by the headlights of the train, I saw something else. His face was distorted. His features twisted, stretched in a grotesque manner, like something unnatural had taken hold of him. His eyes were wide, crazed, the whites of them bloodshot, and his mouth hung slightly open as if he was on the verge of speaking. The train screeched to a halt just behind him, the sound of the wheels grinding against the track filling the air. The platform was bathed in an eerie glow from the headlights, and for a moment everything felt surreal. The world seemed to stretch in slow motion. Lucas raised a hand, his fingers twitching in a way that made my stomach turn. His breath was ragged and his body swayed slightly as if he couldn't stand still. "She told me to bring you here," he whispered, the words rasping from his throat. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to know. I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything to escape this nightmare, but my feet were frozen to the ground. His voice grew louder, and his eyes locked onto mine with a ferocity that made my heart race. "You're part of the game now, the tracks, the wires, the woman. She told me you'd come." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Everything was suffocating. And then, as if on cue, the train door opened with a slow hiss. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the flickering lights inside the car. I couldn't make out their features at first, but something about them felt wrong. They were too still, too silent. A chill ran through me. Without thinking, I stepped back from the door, my back pressed to the cold wall of the station. The train car was dark, but in the dim light, I saw the shape step forward into the train station, and it felt like the world had shifted on its axis. It was a woman. Her face was obscured by long, tangled hair, her clothes ragged and torn like she had been wandering for years. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and she moved with a jerky, unnatural motion. Her eyes were the worst part. Black, empty, void of any light. Hollow. I froze. I had seen her before, in the train, in my dreams. The woman in the wires. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't supposed to be here. None of this was supposed to be happening. But it was. The woman's lips moved, but I couldn't hear her words. Then, her hand reached out slowly, too slowly, toward me. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, a stabbing, gut-wrenching feeling that made me fall to my knees. The air thickened, and the walls of the station seemed to close in on me. My breath grew shallow, my pulse erratic. Then, in a moment of clarity, I understood. The woman wasn't here to hurt me. She wasn't here to kill me. She was here to make me part of it. Part of the tracks, part of the wires, part of the game. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the woman's outstretched hand, her fingers cold and dark. And I knew then that I had been caught. And when I woke up, I wasn't at Blackwater Station anymore. I wasn't anywhere at all. I was part of the tracks. The whistle of the train echoed through my mind, and the wires hummed with laughter. It was supposed to be an easy drive back. Just a few hours on the road and we'd be home laughing about the camping trip and all the ridiculous things we'd done, like when Marco thought he could cook hot dogs on a rock and nearly set the entire campsite on fire. But as we headed back to civilization, I had this gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach, a sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the weather. The fog was thicker than I remembered, rolling in like it had been waiting for us. The trees lining the road seemed to stretch up higher and closer, casting long shadows that danced in the dim light of the truck's headlights. It was late, way too late for us to be driving through this remote stretch of Devil's Hollow. My phone had no signal, not that I'd expected it to, but it still felt wrong. The kind of wrong you can't put your finger on. Shouldn't we have passed the county line by now? Jess asked from the passenger seat. She had been quiet up until then, staring out her window at the endless rows of trees. It was hard to tell if she was just tired or if she too was starting to feel that same unease that had settled in my chest. Yeah, I said, glancing at the road signs. We're off track, I think. We should have been out of here by now. Ryan, our driver, didn't seem bothered. He was always the calm one, the one who never let anything ruffle his feathers. But then, he wasn't the one worrying about getting lost in the middle of nowhere. That's when we saw it. Out of nowhere, the fog parted just enough for us to make out a shape on the side of the road. A rusted old camper van, sitting crooked in the ditch. Its hazard lights blinked on and off like a dying pulse. The van looked like it had been there for years, but something about it made me think it hadn't been abandoned for long. A woman was standing beside it, her arms raised, waving frantically. Her face was partially obscured by the mist, but I could make out enough to see that she was desperate. Ryan slowed the truck, his hands gripping the wheel tighter. She might need help, he muttered, pulling the truck to a stop. Jess glanced at me, eyes wide. Should we stop? This place is... I don't know, it feels wrong. I didn't know how to explain it, but I felt it too. Something about the scene just didn't sit right. The way the fog pressed in around the van, the eerie silence of the woods. It felt like the world had gone still. But Ryan was already unbuckling his seatbelt and Marco was nodding like it was the most natural thing to do. Let's just help her, Ryan said, already reaching for the door handle. We all got out of the truck, the chill of the evening air biting at my skin. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling that had settled deeper into my bones. The woman was standing just outside the van, looking at us with wide, pleading eyes. "Please!" she shouted, her voice shaking. "My battery's dead and my phone won't work out here. Can you help me? Please!" Her voice was sharp, desperate, too sharp. It sent a chill down my spine, but I tried to brush it off. She was just a woman in trouble, stuck in the middle of nowhere, right? Ryan didn't hesitate. He was always the first to jump into action. "I've got jumper cables in the truck. We'll get you back on the road in no time." The woman didn't say anything in response. She just kept staring at the open door of the van, her hands twitching at her sides. There was something off about her, something that didn't sit right. I looked over at Jess, who seemed just as uneasy as I was. She didn't speak, but I could tell she was thinking the same thing. "Let's get this over with," Marco muttered, always the first to dismiss the tension in the air. "Help her out, Ryan, and let's go. I'm starving." But I couldn't shake the feeling that we shouldn't be here, that something about the whole situation was wrong. Something was watching us. The woods, the fog. It was like the world had gone silent just for us waiting. Ryan popped open the hood of the van and started fiddling with the cables, his face set with determination. The woman hadn't moved. She just stood there, her eyes flicking back and forth between Ryan and the open van door. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it, but the longer we stood there, the more I could feel the weight of something invisible pressing down on me. It wasn't right, none of it was. "Let's just do this fast," I whispered to Jess, not sure if I was trying to calm her or myself. And then, as if on cue, the woman spoke again. "You're all so kind," she said, her voice softer now, almost too soft. So kind." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was wide, unsettling, like it was plastered on, forced. My stomach churned, and I took a step back, but the others didn't seem to notice. I had no idea what we'd just gotten ourselves into, but I was about to find out. The air felt thicker now, heavier. The smell of damp earth and pine needles clung to everything, suffocating. The woods were so silent, it was as if all the life had been sucked out of the place. I couldn't remember the last time I had heard a bird or even the rustling of leaves in the wind. The world felt frozen, like time itself had come to a standstill. And that feeling, it kept clawing at me, like something lurking just beyond the trees was waiting for us to make a move. Ryan wasn't bothered by any of it. He had that calm Boy Scout thing going on, always ready to help, always thinking the best of people. But that woman's presence was starting to wear on me, and I could see it was starting to get to the others too. Jess had her arms crossed, tightly against her chest, like she was trying to keep herself from feeling the cold. Marco had his hands stuffed into his pockets, his eyes darting around nervously. I had a terrible feeling that something wasn't right. Every instinct was telling me to get back in the truck, drive off, forget the woman and her van. But Ryan was already focused on the engine. He was twisting wires together, the engine humming with life as he made the connection. "All right," Ryan said, standing up and brushing off his hands. He gave the woman a smile, but it looked strained. "That should do it. Your battery's good as new. You'll be on your way in no time." The woman didn't respond immediately. She was still standing near the van, her fingers twitching at her side, her gaze fixed on the open door. For a moment I thought she hadn't heard him. Maybe she was just that grateful, too overwhelmed to respond. But when she spoke, her voice was so soft, almost like a murmur, that I had to strain to hear her. "You're all so kind," she said again. But this time her words felt heavier, like they carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Her eyes flicked over to me, direct, sharp, and for a second I swear I saw something in her expression. A flicker, like she knew something I didn't, like she had been watching me for a long time. Ryan didn't seem to notice. He was too busy trying to make small talk, telling her how she could just leave the van running for a while to charge up the battery. He was clearly trying to ease the tension, but it wasn't working. Jess, still standing in the truck's shadow, gave me a nervous look. I could see the same unease on her face that had been growing inside me. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" I asked, my voice coming out sharper than I intended. I don't know why I asked it. Maybe it was just a way to break the silence, or maybe I just wanted to get out of there. But her reaction wasn't what I expected. The woman's face tightened, like the question had triggered something inside her. For a brief moment, I saw her glance down at her little girl, who was still clinging to her leg, silent as a stone. The child hadn't made a sound since we arrived, not even a whimper. The girl's head was down, her face hidden by her mother's jeans. She hadn't looked up once, not even to acknowledge us standing there. No, the woman said quickly, her voice tight. She smiled again, but this time it seemed forced, like she was holding something back. "We're fine. Just needed a little help. That's all." She paused, her eyes gliding over Ryan, Marco, and then back to me. Something about the way she looked at me sent another shiver down my spine. "You're so kind to stop," she continued, but now the words felt more rehearsed. "So very kind. You don't know how much this means." And then, as if in a trance, she took a slow step closer to us. The fog seemed to part around her, just enough for her to slip through like a shadow. "You really should meet my husband," she said suddenly, her tone flat, the warmth drained from her voice. I froze. My heart skipped a beat, a rush of adrenaline flooding my system. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, my body instinctively taking a step back. Ryan was still oblivious, leaning against the truck and adjusting the jumper cables. "No problem at all," he said, grinning. "Just glad we could help." But the woman wasn't listening. She reached for the van door with a slow, deliberate motion, pulling it open wider. The interior was shrouded in darkness, too dark to see anything clearly. But I could feel it. Someone, was inside. There was a movement in the back seat, a sudden shift in the shadows. Something tall and unnatural, something that didn't belong. I didn't want to look. I couldn't make myself look, but my eyes betrayed me. I saw it, a shape impossibly tall, uncoiling from the back seat like a monstrous spider. It wasn't just the size that was wrong, it was the way it moved. There was no fluidity to it, just sharp jerking movements as if it were struggling to exist in this world. I felt a cold rush flood my chest, the fear crawling up my throat like a choking weight. My mind was screaming at me to run, but my body was frozen in place, unable to move. Ryan's voice seemed distant, muffled as if it were coming from far away. "You didn't even meet my husband," the woman repeated, her smile now gone, replaced by something darker, colder. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. Without thinking, I grabbed Jess's arm, pulling her back toward the truck, my feet stumbling in panic. Marco followed, his eyes wide with terror, and I could hear Ryan's confused voice as he turned to us, asking what was wrong. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I could feel the presence of something terrible behind me, following us as we hurried to the truck. I didn't even wait for Ryan to get in. The door slammed shut, and the engine roared to life. We tore down the road, the tires screeching, the engine whining in protest. But it wasn't until I glanced back in the rearview mirror that I saw it. The woman, standing perfectly still in the middle of the road, her eyes locked on us, unblinking. And as we drove away, I saw the little girl lift her head, her eyes glowing, faintly in the dark. She waved, and then the fog swallowed them whole. The drive back felt unreal. We were all in shock, each of us trying to process what had just happened, but no one could make sense of it. The night was too quiet now. The road, too still. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. The only sound was the hum of the tires on the pavement and the occasional soft breath from the back seat. Ryan kept glancing in the rearview mirror, his hands tight on the wheel, as though he expected to see headlights or something else pursuing us, but the road behind was empty. No sign of the woman, the van, or whatever had been lurking in the shadows. Jess was quiet, which was rare for her. Usually she had something to say, but right now all she did was stare out the window, her face pale in the glow of the dashboard lights. Marco was the same. He sat slouched in the back seat, his eyes distant, clearly fighting the same wave of disbelief that was crashing over all of us. "Ryan," I broke the silence, my voice hoarse. "What the hell was that?" Ryan didn't answer right away. He just kept driving, the road unspooling in front of us, the headlights cutting through the fog like a knife. He looked lost in thought, his jaw tight, his brow furrowed. "I don't know," he finally muttered. "But that was wrong. It felt wrong." He exhaled deeply, his knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. I've never been so freaked out in my life. I glanced at Marco in the rearview mirror, meeting his eyes for a split second before he looked away, his hands clenched into fists in his lap. "You saw that thing in the van too, right?" I asked. Marco hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I saw it. I don't know what the hell it was, but it wasn't human." Leah's voice was quiet from the back seat. "Did you see her eyes?" I turned to look at her. Leah had been the first one to notice something was off with the woman, the one who had whispered for us to leave before everything went south. She was sitting forward now, her hands folded in her lap, her expression grim. "Yeah," I said, my stomach tightening. Her pupils were blown wide, like she'd been in the dark for a long time, like she wasn't used to the light. "Exactly," Leah said, nodding. "And she didn't blink once. Not once." Ryan didn't say anything, but I could tell he was listening. He was thinking about it, probably trying to make sense of it all. It didn't make sense to me. None of it did. We drove in silence for a while longer, the fog thickening as we got further from the woods, until we reached the intersection where the road split. Ryan turned left, heading back toward the main highway. I thought we were out. Of the woods, literally. But something about this place, about what had happened, still clung to the air, thick like a bad smell. We didn't talk again until we reached a small convenience store at the edge of the county line. The lights flickered as we pulled into the lot, casting an eerie glow over everything. It was the kind of place that never felt fully awake, even at noon, but now it felt like an oasis. I needed to get out of the truck, needed some space to breathe. Ryan parked and we all climbed out, stretching our stiff limbs. The cool night air felt like a slap in the face after the suffocating heat in the truck. "I need a drink," Jess muttered, heading for the store. "I'll go with you," Leah said, quickly, her voice shaky like she wanted to get out of the truck as much as Jess did. Marco and I lingered by the truck, not speaking. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, the unease still gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. "I think we should call the cops," I said suddenly, my voice breaking the silence. It was the first time I'd voiced what had been bothering me the whole time. I could feel Marco looking at me. "I don't know if that would do any good," he said quietly. "What would we even tell them? That we saw a woman and her daughter on the side of the road and then what? A monster in the van? The van was gone, man. There's nothing for them to find." I didn't have a good response to that. He was right. There was nothing to show for what happened. The woman, the van, even the kid, they were all gone. It was like it had never happened. I don't know. It just feels wrong, you know? I ran a hand through my hair, frustration seeping into my tone. That van was there, it had those weird lights on, and she was so desperate. I don't care what anyone says, I don't buy it. Something was off about that whole situation. Marco nodded, but his expression didn't change. He was just as confused as I was, maybe more. "We're all just shaken up, man. We should just get home. This isn't something the cops are gonna fix. We're not gonna make them believe us." I hated the idea. But I couldn't argue with him. The cops wouldn't believe us. How could they? What could we tell them? There was no proof, just a story. A crazy, impossible story. We stood there for a minute, the quiet of the night surrounding us. I felt that same feeling again, the one that told me something wasn't right. But I didn't know what to do about it. "I still don't like it," I muttered under my breath, more to myself than anyone else. Marco glanced at me and his eyes were serious. "Neither do I, man. But what are we supposed to do?" Just then I heard the jingle of the store door opening. Jess and Leah stepped out, each holding a bottle of water, their faces still pale but a little more relaxed than before. They had probably just needed a moment to breathe, too. I didn't say anything more, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't seen the last of the woman in the van. Something about her, about that whole scene, felt unfinished, like we had walked away from something we didn't fully understand. And maybe that was the worst part. The not knowing. The uncertainty that gnawed at my insides. As we climbed back into the truck, Ryan started the engine and we headed down the road, the headlights slicing through the fog. But I couldn't shake the image of the van or the woman's eyes, and I couldn't stop the feeling that we were being watched. The drive back to the city was uneventful, or at least it seemed that way at first. The only sound in the truck was the rhythmic hum of the tires against the road and the soft static on the radio. We were all quiet, lost in our own thoughts, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't the comfortable quiet that came with a long road trip. It was tense, like we were all still carrying the weight of what had happened back there in the woods. I kept replaying the events over and over in my head. The van, the woman, the kid, and the strange, almost unnatural feeling that had hung in the air. It was like being part of some twisted dream where nothing made sense, yet everything felt terrifyingly real. But the more I thought about it, the more questions I had. There were so many things that didn't add up. The woman's voice, the way she didn't thank Ryan when he helped her, how she just stared at the van door like there was something waiting inside it, something we weren't supposed to see. And then the moment she yanked the door open wider, her smile dropping like a mask. I couldn't shake the image of whatever was hidden in the shadows of that van. "Ryan," I said, breaking the silence, my voice thick with unease. "We should have gone back for the van. There was something wrong with that whole situation." Ryan didn't answer right away, just kept his eyes on the road. He was gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly, and I could see his jaw clenched in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. I knew he was thinking the same thing I was, that something wasn't right, that we'd walked away from something we couldn't explain. "I know," he finally muttered. "I know. But what could we do? We'd already made a run for it. We couldn't go back and risk whatever the hell that was." His voice trailed off, but the fear in it was unmistakable. I nodded, though I didn't agree with him. Maybe we should have gone back. Maybe we could have figured out what the hell had been going on with that van. But a part of me didn't want to. The image of the van door swinging open, the shadowy figure uncurling from the back seat, it had been too much. We kept driving, passing the occasional farmhouse or roadside diner, but the further we went, the more the feeling of being watched seemed to settle on me. It was like the woods were still there, closing in around us, even though we were miles away. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights. But there was nothing. No sign of the woman, no sign of the van, just empty road behind us. Leah was the next to speak. "That woman, did you see her eyes? They were too big. Like they were looking through us, not at us." Her voice was shaky, and I could tell she was still rattled. "I saw it too," Marco added, his voice tight. Something about her felt wrong, and when she smiled, that wasn't a real smile. That wasn't human. I couldn't deny it. There was something about the whole thing that didn't sit right with me either. And the worst part was, we didn't know what we had walked into. We didn't know who that woman was or what she wanted from us. The only thing we were sure of was that we had just narrowly escaped something dangerous. Ryan let out a frustrated sigh. "I don't know, guys. I think we're all just freaked out. It's probably nothing." But I didn't believe him. My gut told me that wasn't true. There was something about that woman, something about the way she had behaved that felt calculated. And when she had yanked the van door open, the shadows inside had shifted like something was waiting to step out. We pulled into a gas station a few miles down the road to stretch our legs and grab a drink. I didn't know why we had stopped. Maybe it was just an excuse to take a breath to clear our heads. But as we walked inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The gas station felt too quiet. The clerk behind the counter was too still, his gaze fixed on something beyond the windows. The air felt thick, as if we were walking through an old, forgotten place. I grabbed a bottle of water and turned to Leah, who was standing by the counter, her hands folded tightly in front of her. "You okay?" I asked, trying to read her face. Leah glanced at me, her eyes tired. "I don't know. I can't stop thinking about that van. It feels like we didn't just see something. We disturbed something." "I feel the same way," I admitted. "It's like we were part of some game we didn't even know we were playing." Marco stepped up behind us, his face serious. "Guys, we're freaking ourselves out. It's been a long weekend and we're all running on empty. Let's just get home and forget about this. It doesn't make sense and it never will." But even as Marco said that, I could see the doubt in his eyes. He wasn't as convinced as he was trying to make it seem. We paid for our drinks and got back in the truck. The night seemed to stretch on forever. the road winding in front of us like a never-ending ribbon of asphalt. I kept checking the rearview mirror. I couldn't stop myself, and every time I expected to see headlights or the reflection of that van, waiting, watching. We passed the sign that marked the county line. The landscape was starting to change. More houses, fewer trees, but that only made the feeling in my chest grow tighter. It wasn't just the van. It wasn't just the woman. It was everything. The whole situation felt wrong, like we were being drawn into something we didn't understand. Then, just as we neared the next intersection, I saw something in the mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw headlights in the distance. My heart skipped a beat. "Ryan," I whispered. "I think we're being followed." Ryan glanced at the rearview mirror, then back at the road, his expression unreadable. "I don't see anything." But I was sure. For a second, there had been lights. Faint, but there, closing the distance. "Let's just get home," Leah said, quietly from the back seat. "We'll be safe when we're home." But I wasn't sure about that anymore. I wasn't sure if any of us would be safe. The air in the truck was suffocating as we drove, the tension thick enough to choke us. The road ahead was mostly empty, the occasional house dotting the roadside like forgotten memories. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself that we were just being paranoid, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still out there, watching us, waiting. We were almost halfway home when I first saw the flashing lights, red and blue, flashing in the distance. I held my breath, thinking it was another car, maybe an accident up ahead. But as we got closer, I realized it was a police car parked on the shoulder, its lights spinning in a dizzying pattern. "Should we stop?" Ryan asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. We hadn't seen a single cop car the entire time we'd been driving, and now here one was. It felt like too much of a coincidence. "Yeah, let's see what's going on," Marco replied, clearly as uneasy as I was. We pulled off the road, slowing down as we neared the officer's car. As soon as we stopped, the deputy in the car waved us over. We stepped out of the truck and the night air hit me with a cold bite, like the world had finally woken up. But the deputy's eyes, those eyes, were unsettling, as if he knew something we didn't. He gave a curt nod when we approached. "Evening," the deputy said, his tone clipped. "You folks see anything unusual on Hollow Creek Road tonight?" I swallowed hard, glancing at the others. We all froze, unsure of how to respond. There was no way the deputy could have known about the van. Could he? I started, my voice trailing off. It felt like every word was caught in my throat. We saw a camper van just off the road. The woman was asking for help. The deputy's face didn't change, but his hand went to his belt, as though steadying himself. "You're not the first people to report something strange tonight," he said, his eyes shifting toward the trees like he was watching something just beyond our view. "We've been getting calls all night about a van matching the description. But here's the thing, there isn't any van. There isn't anyone out there." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "What do you mean?" Ryan asked, his voice steady, but the tension in his jaw was visible. "People have been reporting a woman with a kid standing by the road waving cars down," the deputy said. "But when we check the area, there's nothing. No van, no people, no footprints, just an empty stretch of road." His eyes flicked to the woods behind us, the shadows stretching unnaturally long. "It's been happening for months. We think it's some kind of... well, I'm not sure what to call it, but it's not the first time someone's disappeared after encountering them." "Disappeared?" Leah whispered, her hand instinctively gripping the truck door. "You mean, people are just vanishing?" The deputy nodded grimly. "We think so, but we haven't found any evidence and nobody's been able to track down who these people really are. They vanish without a trace every time. No sign of a struggle, no sign of anyone ever being there." My heart began to race again. "What about the van?" I asked. "We saw it. The woman said her battery was dead. We even helped her with jumper cables." The deputy's gaze hardened. "The van doesn't exist, I told you. If you think you saw something, maybe it was a trick of the light. But I'm telling you, we've been out there all night. No van. But we saw it, Marco said, his voice rising with frustration. It was real. It was right there. The deputy took a slow breath. Look, I don't know what you saw, but I'm telling you, we've checked every inch of that road. It's just empty space, and there's nothing to find. I felt a cold dread seep through me, an icy realization that whatever we had seen wasn't just strange. It was something deeper, something impossible. We have to go back, I said before I could stop myself. No, Ryan said sharply. We're not going back. We're done with this. But my mind was already racing. What if we were the next ones to disappear? What if we hadn't just stumbled upon some crazy person in the woods, but something far more sinister? The deputy must have seen the uncertainty in my face. You'd be better off forgetting about it, trust me. He gave us a nod and then turned, heading back to his car without another word. We didn't speak for the rest of the drive home. We didn't need to. We all knew that we hadn't just imagined the van, the woman, or the kid. Something had happened out there. Something we couldn't explain. Something that had followed us back from Hollow Creek Road. The next day, I was alone at home when I got the call. A deputy from the sheriff's office. Is this Ryan Daniels? The voice on the other end asked. I felt a chill spread through me, but I answered. Yes? We found the van, the deputy said. It's parked right where you said it was, on Hollow Creek Road. But here's the thing. It's been there for weeks. The engine's been cold the whole time. And when we opened the door, there were 4 folded notes on the passenger seat. They each had your name, and the names of the other 3, with you. And one word, soon. I felt my heart skip a beat. That wasn't possible. We had been the ones to see that van. We were the ones who had helped her. But the note, the word, soon. I don't know how to explain it, but I can feel it now. Something's coming. I can't shake the feeling that whatever that woman was, whatever we encountered, it's not done with us yet. Maybe we weren't just unlucky. Maybe somehow we were chosen. And now we're all waiting for the next knock on the door. Blackwood Heights wasn't much of a town, at least not anymore. It was one of those places that people forgot existed once they left. Fog rolled in every morning, and the dampness clung to the air like a suffocating blanket. The apartment complex, where I lived, sat perched on the edge of town, crumbling from years of neglect. It wasn't a bad place, but it wasn't exactly a good one either. The kind of place you move into when you're too tired to care about anything more than a roof over your head and cheap rent. I'd been living there for about 6 months. It was the 3rd floor unit of a 4-story building, and the only real selling point was the price. The landlord was an old man who barely remembered my name, and the building itself was a patchwork of peeling paint, creaking stairs, and strange smells that seemed to linger no matter how much I aired out the rooms. The apartment itself wasn't huge, but it had enough space to fit the essentials. A small bedroom, a cluttered office where I spent most of my time working, and a bathroom with frosted glass shower doors that always made me feel a little uneasy. Don't know why I hated that bathroom. Maybe it was the flickering light in the ceiling, or the sound of the pipes groaning late at night like they were breathing. Maybe it was the way the steam always clung to the glass, obscuring everything, outside like some kind of veil between me and the rest of the world. Or maybe it was because every time I used it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in there. It was just a feeling, nothing I could prove. But it never went away. The bathroom always made me feel like something was waiting just behind that foggy glass, watching me, waiting for the right moment to step in. I tried not to think about it too much, though. I had other things on my mind. My job. My life. Moving on. But every time I stood under that flickering light in the bathroom with the steam swirling around me, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that something was wrong. It was just a bathroom after all. But sometimes at night when I'd lay in bed trying to sleep, I could hear the faint groaning of the pipes, and the sound would burrow into my mind, making it impossible to rest. That night, the night it happened, I'd just finished a late shift at work and was dead tired. I didn't even bother to turn on the lights in the hallway as I shuffled down to the bathroom, my mind foggy with exhaustion. The steam from the shower started to rise almost immediately as I turned on the hot water, filling the bathroom with its warm, suffocating haze. I stood there for a minute, letting the water run over me, trying to relax. The familiar hiss of the pipes echoed through the room, and for the first time in weeks I let my guard down. That was when I felt it. It wasn't anything dramatic at first, just a subtle shift in the air. The kind of thing you notice when you're not paying attention, like the temperature dropping or a slight change in pressure. The water, which had been soothing, now felt too hot on my skin. The air around me felt heavier, as though something was pressing down on the room, distorting everything. The sound of the water became muffled, distant, as though something was blocking the noise, drowning it out. I couldn't place it at first, but the sensation was overwhelming. My senses were on high alert, like something was wrong, something was in the bathroom with me, and then I saw it. A hand. It appeared slowly, like something crawling through the steam, pressing against the frosted glass of the shower doors. It was dark, almost black, the fingers too long, too thin. They curled toward me like spider legs, dragging across the fogged glass with deliberate slowness. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I couldn't move. The hand wasn't real, of course. It was just a trick of the steam, right? But the hand didn't disappear. It stayed there, pressing against the glass, moving toward the light switch as though it knew exactly where to go. And then, with a faint click, the lights went out. The room was plunged into darkness. The shower still ran, but the warmth of the water turned cold, as though the air itself had sucked all the heat away. My pulse thundered in my ears. I stood there, frozen, exposed. My skin felt cold, the water now icy against my body. Something was there. Something had been with me in that bathroom. I had to move. I had to get to the light switch. I stretched out my hand, trying to reach for the switch on the wall. My fingers groped blindly, trembling with fear, and then I felt it. Cold, wet skin. Something brushed against my fingers. Something real. I yanked my hand back in a panic, my heart hammering in my chest. But somehow, my hand found the switch, and with a slap, the lights flickered back on, bathing the bathroom in a harsh, artificial light. The air was thick with steam, but the hand was gone. The bathroom was empty. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my chest heaving, my breath shaky. There was nothing in the bathroom with me. The hand wasn't there anymore, but I had felt it. I had touched it. Cold, wet skin. I couldn't explain it. I didn't sleep that night. Every shadow in my apartment seemed to move when I wasn't looking. Every creak in the building made my heart race. The hand, the darkness, the way it knew where the light switch was. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And worst of all, deep down, I knew it would be back. Every time I stepped into that bathroom, I could hear it. A slow, wet drag of fingers across the glass just beyond the fog. Waiting, watching, ready to plunge me into darkness again. The night dragged on, stretching far longer than it should have. My bed felt too small, too confining. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hand. Long, dark fingers curled against the frosted glass of the shower door. Every shadow in the room felt like it was moving, as if something was just beyond my line of sight. I kept seeing flashes of it, hearing the wet, dragging sound again, even when I wasn't in the bathroom. Every time the wind rattled the windows, or a car drove by, I would jump, my heart lurching in my chest. I tried to sleep, but sleep felt impossible. I tossed and turned, my skin cold, my mind too awake, too alert. The darkness of the apartment felt like it was closing in on me. The pipes groaned again, as they always did, but now it felt like they were groaning just for me. It was as if they were alive, pressing in on me from all sides. I hadn't planned to go into the bathroom again that night. I didn't want to. But eventually I had no choice. It was morning, the light barely peeking through the blinds, and I had been awake for hours. My body was tired. The need to wash up, to get ready for work, crept in until it felt like it was all I could think about. I told myself it would be different. The hand wasn't real, right? It was just some odd combination of steam and exhaustion. There had to be an explanation. But as I stood there at the bathroom door, my hand hovering over the knob, I hesitated. I could hear the faint sound of the water pipes groaning again, like a low, distant hum coming from the walls. My throat tightened, and I quickly looked away from the frosted glass, not wanting to even glance at it. But I couldn't help it. My eyes kept drifting back to the shower door as if something in there was pulling me toward it. I forced myself to turn the knob and step inside. The moment the door closed behind me, the air felt thick, heavy. The familiar smell of mildew and old soap hit me, mixing with the faint scent of steam in the air. It was like the bathroom had its own breath, its own pulse. I knew that was ridiculous, but I couldn't shake it. I turned on the water, letting it run for a few moments before stepping into the shower. The heat felt good at first, almost like a relief. It was supposed to be comforting, but it only made the tension in my shoulders tighten. The water cascaded down my back, and I tried to force myself to relax, to ignore the feeling that something was watching me. But then I heard it, the soft drag of fingers against glass. I froze, my chest tightening. The sound was so faint I wasn't sure I could trust it. Maybe it was just the condensation on the door, the way the steam had settled. But no, it was too deliberate, too clear. The fingers dragged again, slowly, wetly, and this time, I couldn't ignore it. The sensation of something being there, of being watched, crawled up my spine. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and I glanced toward the glass. I couldn't stop myself. There was nothing there. No hand, no figure, just the fogged glass, a swirl of steam. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was on the other side, something waiting for the right moment to reach through. I felt vulnerable, exposed, as the water continued to run, filling the room with its relentless hiss. The bathroom seemed to grow smaller, the walls pressing in around me. My fingers trembled as I reached for the soap, trying to focus on something else, anything else. But the drag of fingers against the glass was still there, just beyond the steam, waiting. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned off the water and stepped out of the shower, the cold air of the bathroom hitting my damp skin. I wiped my hands on the towel, my mind spinning with the sound of those fingers, that dragging motion. I couldn't let it go. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder it became. The cold that had settled in my chest spread throughout my limbs. I quickly dressed and made my way into the kitchen, trying to focus on something else, anything else. But every time I looked at the hallway, at the door leading to the bathroom, I felt like I was waiting for something to come out of the shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that it was just a matter of time before whatever was in there with me decided to step into my world, step out of the fog, and make its presence known. It wasn't just the hand. It was the knowledge that it knew exactly where the light switch was, the way it had pressed the switch so effortlessly. There was something deeply unsettling about that, about how it had been able to manipulate the light, turning everything into darkness, leaving me completely vulnerable in that moment. The day passed in a blur. I went to work, but it felt like I was only half there. Every time I looked at a shadow in the corner of the office or the flickering light above my desk, my mind would drift back to that moment in the bathroom, to that hand. I couldn't get it out of my head. It was like it had planted itself there in my mind, taking root and feeding off my fear. The longer I went without confronting it, the worse it seemed to get. That night, as I sat on the couch, staring at the TV but not really, watching it, I kept hearing that dragging sound again. I kept hearing it in my head, like it was following me, like it was always there, lurking just behind me, waiting for the right time to strike. I knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. I had to confront it. I had to figure out what the hell was going on in that bathroom. I had to know. But the thought of going back in there made my stomach turn. What if it wasn't just some trick of the mind? What if it was real? What if that hand was real? I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in place before the sound of the pipes groaning again snapped me out of my trance. This time, it wasn't just in my mind. The pipes were groaning like they were alive, the sound echoing through the walls, vibrating the air. It wasn't natural. It wasn't normal. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked down the hallway toward the bathroom. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I had to know. I had to end this. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, the faint smell of mildew and dampness seeping out into the hallway. I stepped inside, my pulse racing. The air was thick with steam, the fog on the glass even heavier than usual. And then, I saw it again. The hand. This time it wasn't on the other side of the glass. It was inside the shower. Its fingers curled around the edge of the door, dark and elongated, pressing against the frosted glass like it was trying to reach through. Backed away, my breath catching in my throat. I knew it was coming for me. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't alone at all. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The sight of that hand, pressed so deliberately against the frosted glass, was enough to freeze me in place. It was darker, now the steam swirling around it like the beginning of some nightmare, wrapping it in a hazy mist that made everything feel wrong. The fingers were long, too long, their joints too sharp. They weren't like any hand I had ever seen before, stood there paralyzed, staring at it. My mind screamed at me to run, to turn and bolt, but my feet felt like they were stuck in quicksand, unable to move. The bathroom felt smaller, the walls closing in, and for a moment all I could hear was the deafening rush of blood in my ears. I slowly took a step backward, my eyes never leaving the hand. I didn't know why, but I couldn't look away. It was as though the hand was calling to me, pulling me into something I couldn't comprehend. The hand shifted, slowly, deliberately. The fingers curled. One by one they bent like a spider's legs, flexing as if the hand was testing the air, feeling it, sensing its surroundings. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead and my stomach turned. I didn't know what to do. Should I scream? Should I run? Should I wait? But before I could make up my mind, I felt it. The air around me shift, the temperature drop. The faint groaning noise of the pipes seemed to grow louder, closer. The silence in the apartment was broken only by the soft rustling sound of the hand on the glass, dragging, pulling, making that sickening wet sound as if something was trying to claw its way through. And then, just like that, the hand moved. It slid down the glass, its fingers scraping the surface, leaving a streak of condensation behind. I watched in horror as it moved lower, the fingers stretching, almost reaching for the light switch again. I knew what it was doing. It had done it before. It knew exactly what it wanted. The bathroom light flickered, casting shadows across the walls. I felt the chill sweep over me, and I realized, the light. It wanted to plunge the room into darkness again. I couldn't let it. I couldn't stand there and be helpless again. This time I had to do something. I pushed myself into motion. My legs felt heavy, like they were dragging through water, but I forced myself to move toward the light switch. The hand was still there, still pressing against the glass, its fingers sliding, dragging, reaching for the darkness. I reached out. My fingers grazed the switch, and then I felt it. A cold, wet sensation wrapped around my fingers, something soft and clammy. My body froze, a jolt of fear shooting through me as I pulled my hand back. It wasn't just a touch. It was like something was reaching out from the other side of the glass, through the glass itself, to grab hold of me. My hand burned where it had brushed against that cold, slimy skin. I ripped the switch on. My heart pounding in my chest, and the light snapped on, flooding the room with harsh, sterile brightness. The bathroom returned to its familiar, safe state, just as it had been before. But the hand was gone. The fogged glass was empty. For a moment, I thought maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was just exhaustion playing tricks on me, but I couldn't shake the sensation. I could still feel the coldness on my fingers, the unnatural slickness of the touch that had gripped me. It wasn't just my imagination. It had been real. I rushed out of the bathroom, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against the wall in the hallway, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My body was trembling, my skin covered in goosebumps. I couldn't escape the feeling that I was still being watched, still being hunted by something that was far beyond my understanding. I didn't know what to do. The logical part of me screamed that it was just a trick of the mind, just my mind, breaking down after weeks of stress, exhaustion, and loneliness. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. It wasn't just a hand. It wasn't just a feeling. It was something that had been inside that bathroom with me, something that had known exactly where to go, something that wanted to hurt me. The idea of it returning, of the hand returning, made my stomach turn. I couldn't stand the thought of being trapped in that room again, feeling so exposed, so vulnerable. The hand knew where the light switch was. It had been there before. And I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't turned the light on in time. I didn't want to find out. For the rest of the day, I avoided the bathroom. I couldn't bring myself to go near it. Every time I walked by, I felt the pull, like something was waiting behind that door, just beyond the frosted glass. I kept telling myself it was just my imagination, that I was overreacting. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. That night, I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I couldn't stop thinking about the hand, how it had known exactly where the light switch was, how it had been so deliberate in its movements. There was something intentional about it, something planned. The thought terrified me. I tossed and turned, trying to push the thoughts out of my head, but they kept creeping back in. And then, as I finally started to drift off to sleep, I heard it. A faint, distant sound, a wet drag. My heart stopped. It was the same sound, the same dragging, scratching sound. I knew it. I knew it. It was coming from the bathroom. It was coming from behind the door. I bolted upright in bed, my pulse racing, my breath shallow. The sound continued. Slow, wet, deliberate. It was waiting for me. I couldn't stay here anymore. I couldn't keep running from it. I knew I had to confront it. But as I got up, ready to face whatever was lurking in that bathroom, my hand brushed against something cold on the floor. I looked down and my blood ran cold. A single, dark, wet fingerprint was on the floor, right in front of the bathroom door. It was too late. It had already been here. The wet fingerprint on the floor was like a slap to the face. I stood there, frozen, my legs unwilling to move, my mind whirling. The bathroom door was only a few feet away, yet it felt like it was miles beyond me. My chest was tight, like something heavy was pressing down on my ribs. The sound of the dragging fingers, the wetness kept repeating in my mind over and over. Each time it felt closer, more real. I didn't know how long I stood there staring at the print. It was darker than the surrounding wood, but not by much. The wetness was still fresh, and it glistened under the faint light spilling from the bedroom. It wasn't a big print, just a single finger, but it was enough to tell me everything I needed to know. It was real. It wasn't a dream or a figment of my imagination. Something had come from the bathroom. Something had crossed the threshold and left its mark on my apartment. I wasn't sure what terrified me more, the fact that I had felt the touch of cold, slimy skin earlier, or the fact that I wasn't alone in my apartment anymore. I didn't want to touch the print. I didn't want to get any closer to it, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. The logical part of my brain kept screaming at me that this was ridiculous. There had to be an explanation. Maybe I had brushed up against something wet without realizing it. Maybe it was just a leaky pipe or condensation from the shower doors. But the sinking feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I didn't trust the pipes. I didn't trust the bathroom. I didn't trust what I had felt in there. I had to know what was going on. I had to understand. I couldn't live like this, wondering every day if that thing, whatever it was, would come back. I took a deep breath and forced my legs to move. Slowly, almost reluctantly, I approached the bathroom door. The wet print on the floor was too close now, almost as if it were daring me to go inside. I reached for the doorknob, but my fingers hovered just above it, unsure whether I should even go in. But what choice did I have? I wasn't going to let whatever this was control me. The knob turned easily under my grip. My hand, shaking, pushed. The door open. The bathroom was just as I had left it, and yet it was so much worse. The air felt colder in here, more oppressive. The steam was gone, but the oppressive dampness remained, thick and musty. The smell of mildew seemed stronger than before, as if the room was swallowing everything around it. I stepped inside, my feet almost slipping on the tiled floor. The shower was still, thank God, off. But the faint outline of condensation on the frosted glass reminded me of what I had felt earlier. But the worst part? The light was still on. The switch was still in its place, and that was the problem. I hadn't turned the light on after I'd left the bathroom. I hadn't gone back in until now. It should have been off, shouldn't it? But it was on, as if something, had turned it on after I left. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized that the hand hadn't just dragged across the glass. It hadn't been an accident. The hand had known what it was doing. It had known exactly where the light switch was, exactly how to press the button. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat almost choking me. It was toying with me. I turned to leave, but my eyes were drawn to the shower door once again. It wasn't just the condensation, it was something more. Something darker. For the first time since I'd entered the room, I noticed the faint outline of a figure in the glass. It wasn't clear at first, but as I stared, it became more distinct. It was like a shadow had settled behind the frosted glass. A tall shape slightly hunched like it was watching me. A figure that wasn't entirely human. The outline shifted. I stepped back, my breath coming faster now. My instincts screamed at me to get out of the bathroom, to leave. I had to leave. But I couldn't move, I couldn't look away. The figure was there, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something more. Eyes. Dark, black, staring at me from the other side of the shower door. I didn't wait any longer. My legs finally obeyed me, and I slammed the bathroom door shut, behind me. The sound of the door hitting the frame echoed through the apartment, a sharp, terrifying noise that made the air feel even heavier. I stood in the hallway, panting, trying to catch my breath. The silence around me felt suffocating. There was no sound in the apartment now, no creaking pipes, no hum of the lights, nothing, except the whisper, the faintest sound, like a breeze, a breath. A soft, wet, dragging sound that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't. The sound was coming from the bathroom. My mind raced with possibilities, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. But nothing made sense. The shadow. The figure in the glass. The hand. It wasn't just some odd manifestation, some trick of the light. There was something in there. Something that had been waiting for me. Something that wanted to be let in. The drag of the fingers against the glass started again. Slowly. Deliberately. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get out. I had to leave this place. But then, a thought crossed my mind. A horrible, terrifying thought. What if it wasn't just in the bathroom? What if it had followed me out here? I looked around the apartment. The darkness seemed to stretch, to loom. Over every corner, every shadow felt like it was watching me. I couldn't be sure, but I felt like it was close. Closer than before. My stomach twisted with dread. There was something in the apartment now. Something that knew I was here. And I knew, deep down, that no matter how far I ran, no matter where I went, I couldn't escape it. It had already come. Through the door. It was inside. The air in my apartment felt suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in on me. My heart raced, the steady thrum of panic growing louder with every passing second. The bathroom door was still shut, but the dragging sound of fingers against the glass never stopped. It was constant now, a relentless rhythm that matched the frantic beat of my pulse. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding the bathroom. I couldn't stay here, trapped in this apartment with it lurking just behind the door. My mind was racing, the flood of thoughts barely making sense. I needed to do something, anything. If I stayed here, it was going to break me. I forced myself to move. Each step felt like it took an eternity, my legs unsteady, my breath shallow. My hand hovered over the doorknob of the bathroom once again, my fingers tingling with fear. The dragging sound was louder now, and I could almost feel it crawling up my spine, whispering that it was waiting for me. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, trying to center myself, but all I could hear was the dragging. All I could feel was the cold sweat coating my skin. When I opened my eyes, I grabbed the door handle and yanked it open. The bathroom was just as I had left it, empty, save for the lingering mist on the glass. The light was on, of course, but it flickered more violently now, like it was struggling to stay on. The shower doors remained fogged, and the outline of the figure behind them was even clearer now, tall, looming, hunched, as though it was standing, perfectly still, waiting for me to make the next move. I didn't hesitate this time. I stepped into the bathroom, forcing myself forward. The wet dragging sound was still there, like it was coming from the glass itself, but now I could hear something else. A low whisper, so faint, so distant it was barely audible, but it was there. It was calling to me. I looked at the glass, trying to steady my breathing, and the figure shifted. Slowly, it took a step forward, its outline moving as if it were stretching, reaching for me. I felt a coldness seep through the room, colder than the chill that had already settled in my bones. The shadow seemed to distort, making the bathroom feel much larger, more cavernous, more suffocating. The figure inside the glass had a presence to it, its own energy, something so dark and so tangible. I could feel it pressing in on me. The air was thick with it. I took a deep breath, trying to push the fear down. It wasn't enough. I reached out, a single trembling hand extended toward the shower doors. My fingers brushed against the frosted surface, the condensation cold and slick beneath my touch. But something else brushed back. Something wet. Something alive. I jerked my hand back, almost falling as I stumbled away from the glass. I had to face it. There was no other way out. "I'm not afraid of you," I muttered, though my voice shook. The figure moved again, this time with a deliberate, sickening slowness. It was as if it was savoring my fear, feeding off it. And then the figure stepped closer, right up against the glass, its hands pressing against the surface, its fingers long, too long. I couldn't take it anymore. Without thinking, I grabbed the shower door handle and pulled it open. For a split second, nothing happened. The bathroom was still silent. The air grew colder. And then, in a blur of motion, it was there. The figure was no longer just a shape behind the glass. It was real, solid, in front of me. I staggered back, but my legs gave out beneath me, and I crashed to the floor. The thing, it wasn't human. It was tall, impossibly tall, with limbs that seemed to stretch and bend unnaturally. Its skin was pale and slick, like wet marble, its face barely visible through the dark hair that hung around it in jagged, matted clumps. Its eyes, if they could even be called eyes, were black, empty, voids that stared straight into me with an intensity that made my chest tighten. Its mouth opened, a gaping, hollow space. It spoke. The words were not words at all, but a low, guttural sound, a croaking whisper that felt like it was coming from the deepest parts of my brain, the parts I didn't want to remember. The voice felt like it was everywhere at once, crawling through my skin, wrapping around my throat, filling my head. "You're mine now," it rasped. The lights flickered violently, the room plunging in and out of darkness. I tried to scream, but the sound was stuck in my throat. The thing reached out, its fingers impossibly long, its wet skin glistening under the bathroom light. I had no time to react. It grabbed my arm, pulling me toward it with strength that was unnatural. I could feel its grip, cold and slimy, as it hauled me closer, its face inches from mine. The smell was overpowering now, like wet earth decay, something ancient and putrid. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to get away. And then I realized I wasn't alone in the bathroom. I could see it now, through the edges of my blurry vision. In the corner of the room, the shadow of another figure appeared. It was more subtle, this time blending with the shadows, but I saw it. Its outline, too, was tall, too thin, and behind that shadow there was another, and another. Figures. Shadows. They moved in unison like a crowd of people, waiting for something. And I knew what they were. I knew what they wanted. They had been here all along. The thing holding me pulled me closer still, its mouth moving slowly as if savoring every second. "You'll never leave," it whispered. I fought back with everything I had left. My hands pressed against its chest, its cold skin slick and slimy under my touch. I pushed as hard as I could, but my strength was fading, and it was all too much. The figures in the shadows moved closer, surrounding me, closing in. I was trapped. With everything inside me screaming, I lunged forward and pulled the light switch. The bathroom plunged into darkness. The cold, wet hand released me, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the bathroom floor alone. The shadows were gone, the figures were gone. The light was back on, steady and bright. I was alone in the bathroom. I scrambled to my feet, my head spinning, the weight of everything hitting me all at once. I turned to the bathroom mirror, hoping to make sense of it all, to see that it was just a hallucination. But when I looked into the glass, I saw my reflection, and in the corner of the mirror, just out of sight, just barely there, was the faint outline of a hand, a dark, long hand. It reached toward me. The light flickered last time, and then everything went black. I never saw the bathroom again. I never returned to the apartment, but I know the hand is still there. I never gave much thought to the subway. It was just a means to an end, something I'd use to get from my crummy apartment to the equally crummy office. The daily grind, routine. That was all it ever was. But then came that damn poster. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind where the air felt stale and everyone was just trying to make it through the week. The fluorescent lights in the subway station flickered above, casting a sickly glow on everything below. I was half conscious, half distracted, as I waited for the train, my mind drifting between spreadsheets and the usual small talk with my coworkers. But then my gaze landed on something that didn't belong. It was taped crookedly to the wall, the edges curling with age. The paper had that yellowed look, like it had been sitting there for months, maybe even longer. But it was new. I would have noticed it before. There was no way I could have missed it. Missing. Daniel Reeves. Last seen October 12th, wearing gray, suit, blue tie. If found, contact Detective R. Holloway. Below the text, a face stared back at me. A pale, gaunt man with sharp features, a thin face that seemed to be pinched in discomfort. But it wasn't the face that got to me. It was the mole, right under his left eye. A small detail, sure, but one I couldn't forget. I froze. My stomach churned. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I knew him. I had just spoken to him. I'd seen him at his desk that morning. A quick exchange about some reports he was working on. Daniel Reeves was sitting at his desk in the corner of our floor when I walked in. He was always the quiet one, the guy who did his work without drawing attention. But he was real. I had seen him, I had talked to him, and now he was missing. Reached into my jacket pocket, my hands shaking as I pulled out my Nokia. My fingers fumbled as I unlocked it, scrolling through the photos. There it was, a selfie from last month's office party. There we were, me and Daniel, standing next to the punch bowl holding red plastic cups. Both of us grinning like we were in on some joke only the two of us knew. The photo was grainy, like most Polaroids are, but there he was. Daniel Reeves, smiling, his tie slightly askew, except the screen was blank. I blinked, wiped the phone's screen with my thumb, but nothing changed. The photo was gone. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. The picture had been there earlier. It had to be. But now, it wasn't. A cold wave of panic crashed over me. I didn't understand what was happening, but I could feel something shifting. Something wrong. I looked. Back up at the poster. The eyes of Daniel Reeves staring out at me, unnervingly blank, like the life had been drained from them. The words missing burned themselves into my mind. Mark? The sound of my name snapped me out of my stupor. I turned, my stomach flipping as I saw Daniel standing behind me. His tie was red, not blue like the poster said. He wasn't missing. He was here. But his eyes, they were different. Wide. Like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. Something terrifying. You saw it, didn't you? He whispered. His voice was low, almost lost in the noise of the station. I nodded, my throat dry. What's going on, Daniel? The words came out in a rush, but my voice sounded distant, hollow. He didn't answer right away. He just stood there, staring at me with an intensity I'd never seen from him before. Then he glanced around as if he was making sure no one else was listening before leaning in close. They're watching, he said, his voice trembling. We shouldn't talk about it, not here, not now. My head was spinning. I wanted to say something, ask him what the hell he was talking about, but the words got stuck. His fingers twitched at his sides as if he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. Suddenly there was a buzz from my pocket, my phone. I fished it out, the screen lighting up as I held it up to show him. It was the photo of us at the party, the one that had been gone. It was back, but now something was different about it. The edges were dark, the colors off, like a distortion, in the film. And there, at the bottom of the picture, just beneath Daniel's face, were 2 words typed in pixelated letters. Erase me. I looked up at Daniel, my heart pounding. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide with something, fear, or maybe dread. You shouldn't have seen that, he whispered. And before I could ask him what the hell was going on, the train roared into the station, drowning out any further conversation. The doors slid open and Daniel stepped back, disappearing into the crowd without another word. I stood there, frozen, my phone still clutched in my hand. The words "erase me" lingered in my mind, echoing in my skull. What the hell had just happened? What was going on with Daniel Reeves? I needed answers. But the moment I stepped onto the train, I realized something. This wasn't a question of curiosity anymore. This was a question of survival. And if I didn't figure out what was happening, I might just end up as another missing person on a yellowed poster. The office felt like a mausoleum when I walked in the next morning. It was the same as always, dimly lit, filled with the low hum of printers and clacking keyboards. The humdrum of employees going about their day without questioning anything. But something was different today. Something had shifted and I could feel it in my gut. The moment I stepped off the elevator, a sense of unease washed over me. I looked around, trying to shake off the anxiety that had taken hold. Everyone was in their usual spots, hunched over their desks, their eyes glued to their monitors. The low murmur of chatter filled the space, but it all seemed muted, far off, like I was in a dream. I walked to my cubicle, my heart still racing from what had happened at the subway. Daniel, the poster, the disappearing photo, my phone buzzing, with those 2 words, erase me. I couldn't shake the image from my mind. It was like it was burned into my retina, the distorted edges of the photo mocking me, reminding me that something wasn't right. I needed to talk to Daniel. I had to know what the hell was going on. I spotted him as soon as I rounded the corner into the accounting department. He was sitting at his desk, typing away like everything was normal. His face, though, was anything but normal. His expression was blank, his eyes distant as if he were on autopilot. And that red tie, red, not blue like the one in the missing poster. It was like something in my brain refused to let go of that detail, the dissonance between what I had seen in the photo and what I was seeing now. I made my way over to him, my steps slow like I was walking through water. My mind was screaming at me to stop, to turn around and walk away, but I couldn't. I had to confront him. I had to know if he knew what was happening. When I reached his desk, I stood there for a moment, unsure of how to start. The words were stuck in my throat, but I finally managed to force them out. "Daniel," I said, my voice a little too loud in the silence of the office. He didn't look up at first, His fingers paused on the keyboard, hovering over the keys, but he didn't move. The tension in the air thickened, and I felt my chest tighten with every passing second. "Daniel," I repeated, this time softer, almost pleading. "I saw the poster, the one in the subway. I saw you on it. What's going on?" He turned slowly, his chair creaking with the movement. When he finally looked at me, I was taken aback by the emptiness in his gaze. There was something wrong, something so wrong about the way he was looking at me. His eyes were wide, but they weren't filled with the recognition I had expected. No, it was more like he was staring through me, as if I weren't even there. "You saw it," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the office. His lips barely moved, but the words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You shouldn't have seen it." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean? Daniel, what's happening? You're here, but the poster, why were you on it?" He didn't answer at first. Instead, his fingers hovered over his keyboard again, but this time he wasn't typing. He was just sitting there, frozen, as if he couldn't bring himself to look at the screen. After a long silence, he whispered again, his voice shaky this time, like he was barely holding it together. "Don't ask. Just don't ask. Please, Mark. You don't understand." My breath caught in my throat. His words were like a cold hand on my chest, suffocating me. I reached for the Polaroid in my jacket pocket, the one I'd taken at the office party. My hands were clammy, but I managed to pull it out and show it to him. "This photo," I said, my voice thick with frustration. It was just there. And then it wasn't. "What the hell is happening, Daniel?" He didn't take the photo from me. He just stared at it like it was a foreign object, something that didn't belong in his world. His eyes darted between the photo and me, and then his face contorted with something I couldn't quite place, fear maybe, or guilt. It was hard to tell. "I told you," he muttered. "You shouldn't have seen it. You shouldn't have seen any of it." I shook my head, trying to make sense of his words, trying to piece everything together. The photo had been there, and now it was gone. His name on the poster, the missing person flyer, the photo that disappeared from my phone. What the hell was happening to him? To me? Suddenly, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, my hand trembling as I unlocked the screen, but this time there was no photo. There was only a single line of text in black and white, simple and stark. "Erase me." I looked back at Daniel, my heart pounding in my chest. This time, he didn't look at me at all. He just stared down at his desk, his hands trembling, his fingers twitching like he was trying to fight something back. "Mark," he said, his voice almost a whisper, "you're not supposed to be here. None of this is real." I didn't understand what he meant. What the hell did he mean? None of this was real? Before I could ask him to explain, the office door opened, and a coworker, Janet from HR, walked in, her eyes flicking to Daniel before landing on me. She smiled at me, but the smile was wrong. Too wide, too forced. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you're trying to act normal, but everything inside of you is screaming to run. "Mark, who are you talking to?" she asked, her voice bright but hollow. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. My stomach churned as I looked around the office. But Daniel wasn't there. Not anymore. I turned back to the desk, my breath catching in my throat. The chair was empty, the space where he had sat only moments ago now eerily vacant. I looked back at Janet, my mind racing. "What? Where's Daniel?" My voice cracked, but I couldn't help it. I needed answers. Janet frowned, her smile fading. "Who, Mark? There's no one named Daniel here." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" He's right there." I pointed toward the desk, but the desk was empty, completely empty. Her gaze shifted toward me, but there was no recognition in her eyes, no understanding. Just the same hollow smile. "Are you feeling okay, Mark? You look a little pale." The words felt like ice being shoved into my chest. The world around me was starting to blur, everything spinning faster than I could grasp. I was losing my grip. "Daniel, Reeves doesn't work here," Janet said, her tone flat now. There never was a Daniel Reeves. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I looked around at the cubicles. The hum of the fluorescent lights grew louder, like a drum, pounding in my ears. The walls felt like they were closing in. I was being erased, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The day dragged on, but it felt like I was wading through thick, viscous mud. Each step was a struggle. My mind kept flashing back to the last conversation I had with Daniel, or the last time I thought I had talked to him. It was like I had crossed a line, a boundary that I hadn't even realized was there until it was too late. And now nothing made sense. I couldn't focus on anything. Not the spreadsheets, not the endless emails. The fluorescent lights above seemed louder than ever, buzzing like a persistent, irritating hum, too high-pitched and shrill. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, slowly but steadily. I had to fight the urge to just get up and leave, to escape, to get out of this suffocating office, but where could I go? I kept glancing at the empty spot where Daniel's desk used to be, my thoughts circling back to him like an insect trapped in a jar. What had happened to him? Was he real? Had he ever been real? I wasn't sure if I was starting to lose it, but I couldn't stop the growing fear in my chest. The office felt wrong. People were talking, but none of it made sense. I couldn't focus on anything they said, like their words were distant, muffled by a thick layer of static. I couldn't stop looking at their faces, wondering how much of them was real. By the time the lunch hour rolled around, I was barely hanging on. I stumbled into the break room, my stomach gnawing at me, but I couldn't bring myself to eat. I grabbed a cup of coffee, the bitter taste barely registering as I took a sip. The room was buzzing with the usual chatter, but everything felt off. I was hearing voices, but not the way I usually did. I couldn't focus. Every sentence seemed to come from somewhere else, a place just beyond my reach, like I was hearing things through a veil. Then, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Across the room, at the corner table, there was a group of people laughing. They were all familiar faces, the people I saw every day. But as I stared at them, something shifted in my mind. There was a gap, a hole. There was one person missing. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was wrong. The chairs were full. Everyone was in their usual spots. But there was this absence, a missing presence. The air in the room felt heavier. I took another sip of coffee, my hand trembling. As I turned away from the table, I glanced down at the coffee cup in my hand. The reflection in the dark liquid seemed distorted, warped, like I was looking at something from another world. I blinked and tried to shake the image away, but it lingered, clinging to the back of my mind. My mind raced as I walked back to my cubicle. I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something had changed. And yet nothing had. Or had it? My thoughts felt like they were scattering in all directions, too fast for me to keep track of. I couldn't even remember the last time I had been able to focus on something for more than a few minutes. I sat down at my desk and pulled out my phone, the Nokia, the damn phone that had started all of this. I turned it on and checked for messages, anything that might give me some kind of clue as to what was happening. There was nothing. No new texts, no calls, but there was something else. Opened the photo gallery. My stomach turned when I saw the Polaroid I'd taken at the office Christmas party. I clicked on it, and for a moment I thought I saw it again, that blurred figure. But then the image went black, as though the phone had swallowed it whole. I turned it off and on again. The screen flickered, and when it came back on, the photo was gone. But there was something worse now. On the home screen, under the list of apps, in the space where my contact list should have been, was a new entry. Erase me. The words glowed faintly, like they were pulsing, beckoning me. My hands started to shake, violently, the phone slipping out of my grip and landing with a dull thud on the desk. My chest tightened as a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I couldn't breathe. I needed air. I stood up quickly, too quickly. My head spun as I stumbled toward the door, my feet barely touching the ground. The walls seemed to close in on me as I stepped into the hallway. The fluorescent lights above buzzed louder now, the sound grating against my ears. I needed to get out. I had to get out. The elevator. I rushed to it, pressing the button frantically. It seemed to take an eternity to arrive. When the doors finally opened, I stepped inside and pressed the button for the ground floor. But the moment the doors slid shut, I froze. There was a man standing in the corner of the elevator, tall, his face half-shadowed by the dim lighting. I couldn't see him clearly, but something about him felt wrong. His presence felt foreign, like he didn't belong. I could feel his gaze on me, even though I couldn't make out his eyes. I stepped back instinctively, but the man didn't move. He just stood there, perfectly still, like he was waiting for something. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could make a sound, the elevator lurched and the lights flickered. For a moment I thought I saw the man's face shift, his features distorting as if they weren't quite settled. But when the elevator stopped on the ground floor and the doors opened, he was gone. I stumbled out, my heart racing, and when I looked back, the elevator was empty. It was just the same as always. The same sterile hallway. The same mundane floor. I was losing my mind. That much was clear. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just changed. Something had slipped through the cracks, and I wasn't sure I could put it back together again. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and took a deep breath, but the air felt heavy, almost oppressive. The city around me was still moving, people walking by, cars honking in the distance, but it all felt distant, like I wasn't really there, like I was fading, like I wasn't supposed to exist. I stood there for a long moment, just breathing, trying to steady myself. The chaos inside my head was deafening. The walls, the lights, the elevator, the poster, and Daniel. Was any of it real? I didn't know anymore, but I was going to find out. I woke up the next morning with the faint echo of the elevators humming in my ears. It was like the world had shifted overnight, leaving me behind in a disorienting limbo. I couldn't remember when I had gone to bed, only that I had tossed and turned for hours, my mind a storm of confusion, anxiety, and dread. The fluorescent buzz still lingered in my skull, a dull hum that wouldn't go away. Every corner of the apartment felt too sharp, too crisp, like I was looking at it through someone else's eyes. Nothing was quite right. It was as though I had been dropped into an alternate version of my own life, one that was slowly unraveling. And I didn't know how to stop it. I rubbed my face with both hands, forcing myself to wake up. The clock on the nightstand read 7:23 a.m. The same time I always woke up. The same time I always had to rush through my morning routine to catch the train. But today, something felt off. The train ride to the office was a blur of faces. People packed into the subway car, their eyes glazed, lost in their own little worlds. I tried to focus on my reflection in the window, but the image of myself looked wrong. Too tired, too strained. My face seemed out of focus, like I was fading, like I wasn't supposed to be there. I stared at it for longer than I should have, and for a split second I thought I saw someone else staring back at me. I forced myself to look away, pushing the thought out of my head. It was nothing, just the lack of sleep. When I arrived at Blackwood and Graves, the lobby felt colder than usual, the air somehow thinner. The receptionist, Janet, greeted me with her usual forced smile, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't place. She didn't say anything, just looked at me a little too long before turning back to her computer. I walked past her, trying to shake the unease crawling up my spine. I didn't have time for this. I had work to do. Or at least I thought I did. As I entered the office, the first thing I noticed was how empty it felt. The usual noise, the soft murmur of typing, the hum of the printer, the occasional laughter, was gone. The air was still, stifling. The lights above flickered, casting long shadows across the cubicles. I walked to my desk, trying to push the weight of the unease down into the pit of my stomach. But as soon as I sat down, something caught my eye. A piece of paper crumpled and half hidden beneath my keyboard. I unfolded it carefully, my fingers trembling. It was a printout from my computer, a screenshot of the employee directory. I stared at the list of names. There, at the very bottom of the page, was my own name, marked in bold, and next to it, a blank space. No title, no position, just an empty gap. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, but when I looked again, the gap was still there. I had never noticed it before. It hadn't been there yesterday, but I didn't have time to dwell on that. I pulled up the office directory on my computer, my heart pounding in my chest. As the page loaded, I scanned the list for Daniel Reeves. My stomach twisted into a knot when I couldn't find his name anywhere. I checked again. Nothing. I opened the directory again, this time searching for every variation of his name I could. Think of Dan Reeves, D. Reeves, but every time the same result. No Daniel Reeves. A sharp chill crept up my spine. Had he ever existed? I started to feel like I was losing my grip on reality. Maybe this was some kind of joke. Maybe someone was messing with me. But this wasn't funny. It wasn't just the empty directory. It was the nagging feeling in my gut, the constant tension in the air, like something was pressing in from all sides, threatening to consume me. I stood up suddenly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I needed answers. I couldn't keep living in this fog of uncertainty, of half-formed memories and ghostly remnants. I grabbed my coat and stormed out of my cubicle. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I had to find something. Anything that would explain this madness. I made my way down the hallway toward HR. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open without knocking. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by the harsh glow of a single desk lamp. Andrea, the HR assistant, sat hunched over her desk, typing something on the computer. She didn't look up as I entered. "Andrea," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to see Daniel Reeves's file, the employee records." She froze for a moment, her fingers pausing mid-type. Then she slowly looked up, her expression unreadable. "There's no one by that name here," she said quietly. I stared at her, confused. "What do you mean, there's no one by that name? Daniel Reeves was my co-worker. I spoke to him this morning." Andrea blinked slowly, her gaze shifting to the monitor in front of her. She didn't answer. The air in the room felt thick now, oppressive, like we were both standing on the edge of something too terrible to comprehend. I stepped closer. "Look, just show me the records. I need to see it." Andrea's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she was going to refuse. But then she nodded almost imperceptibly and clicked something on her screen. The file opened, and I leaned forward, my eyes scanning the screen. But there was nothing. No record of Daniel Reeves. No employment history, no address, nothing. My heart raced, a cold sweat breaking out across my skin. "This is a mistake," I whispered. "He was here. He had a desk. He was sitting at it this morning." Andrea stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back with a loud thud. Her eyes were wide now, not in surprise, but in something else. Something darker. "Mark, you need to leave now." I stumbled back, disoriented, my mind reeling. I couldn't process what was happening. The walls of the office seemed to shift and warp around me, the air thick with something I couldn't name. I didn't even say goodbye. I just turned and walked out. But as I passed the HR desk, I glanced back one last time. Andrea was staring at me, and in the reflection of her computer screen, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The name Daniel Reeves was there, glowing faintly, just beneath her fingers, like it had been written in invisible ink. But when I blinked, it was gone. The world was fading, slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to stop it. I barely remember how I got home. The train ride was a blur, a dreamlike sequence of disjointed flashes, people staring at their phones, the rhythmic clattering of the tracks beneath me, the dim glow of streetlights through the window. The whole world outside felt so far away, like it was happening to someone else. By the time I stumbled through the door of my apartment, the weight of what I'd seen today was pressing on my chest, suffocating me. My head throbbed with a dull ache, and every movement felt disconnected from reality, as if I were walking through someone else's life. I tried to focus on the familiar, my apartment, the worn couch in the living room, the small kitchen, where the light was still on from last night, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to pull me out of this fog. I sat down at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, not sure what I was looking for anymore. The truth, I guess. I wanted something, anything, to make sense of this madness. But when I opened my email, all I found was an empty inbox except for one message. The subject line read, "You should have reported him missing." I clicked it without thinking. The message was short, almost too short. "You never should have let him disappear. Now look at you. Look at what you've become." My pulse quickened as I stared at the screen. I looked at the time. The email was sent 10:17 a.m., the exact time I had first gone to HR to find Daniel's records. But there was something else that made my stomach churn. The email was sent from Daniel's address. I felt cold all over. My eyes darted to the phone, which still sat on the desk, buzzing intermittently with messages I hadn't bothered to open. Without thinking, I grabbed it and scrolled through them. The first one was from a number I didn't recognize. "Did you forget? It's happening again." I stared at the message, heart pounding. I didn't understand. It felt like I was being dragged down into some endless spiral, with no way out. Then, the phone buzzed again. I looked down, expecting more cryptic messages. But instead, I saw something. Worse, something that made my blood run cold. The screen displayed a group photo of our office retreat from the previous summer. But as I stared at it, I noticed something I hadn't before. Daniel Reeves was missing from the photo. I didn't know how I hadn't noticed it until now. We had all been standing there, smiling, posing for the camera. Everyone but Daniel. Instead, in his place was a blurry figure standing just out of focus, a shadow that couldn't quite hold its shape. I stared at it for what felt like hours, my pulse thundering in my ears. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The figure, it had the same mole under the left eye. It was Daniel, but it wasn't. It couldn't be. I grabbed my coat and rushed out of the apartment, my hands trembling. I couldn't stay here. I needed answers. I needed to know what the hell was going on. I didn't even think to lock the door behind me. I needed to get to the office. No, I needed to get to the records room. I needed to find out everything. Every shred of information I could get my hands on. When I reached the building, the lobby was empty, eerily silent. The fluorescent lights flickered above me, casting long shadows across the polished floor. I walked to the elevator, my feet heavy, with dread. The doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped inside. As the elevator ascended, I felt my chest tighten. I didn't know what I was walking into. I didn't know if I would even find anything, but I had to try. The office was the same as it had been that morning, silent, empty, like it had been abandoned. I made my way to the records room, my mind racing. As I stepped through the door, I immediately saw that something was wrong. The files on the shelves were scattered, disorganized. Some were open, some were missing entirely. I walked to the filing cabinet where Daniel's records should have been. I pulled open the drawer with shaking hands and began flipping through the folders. But as I scanned the names, I saw nothing. No Daniel Reeves. No record. No sign he had ever existed. I opened the next drawer, then the next, growing frantic. But no matter how many files I checked, Daniel was gone. The drawer was empty. A heavy, sinking feeling washed over me. I turned around, eyes wild. The room felt too small now, the walls closing in. It was as if I were caught in a trap, with no way out. Then I heard it, a soft whisper, a voice I recognized. "You should have reported him missing." I spun around, but there was no one there, just the empty room. My breath came out in ragged gasps. My heart was pounding, my mind screaming for clarity. I stumbled backward and bumped into something cold, something solid. I turned slowly. The photo was there again. The same group photo, but this time something was different. The blurred figure had come into focus. It was me. My stomach twisted and I felt the air rush out of my lungs. I was standing in the place of Daniel, and I realized, too late, that I had never been me at all. I looked at the photo, and slowly, as if it was being etched into my mind, the realization hit me. I wasn't Mark Harris, I never had been. The face I saw in the mirror was just a mask, a borrowed skin. I had become just like Daniel, erased. The room around me blurred again. The walls seemed to close in as the world I once knew slipped away, crumbling into nothingness. And somewhere, deep in the recesses of my fading mind, I heard that voice again. Soft, quiet, but final. Now, who's missing? The lights flickered one last time, and everything went dark.